All right, I believe we are live.
Okay, thank you, Chris. Want to welcome everybody to the December edition of the City of St. Charles School Board meeting. Thank everybody for being here with us on the Zoom. Want to welcome everybody watching us online, both live and when it's posted afterwards. Once again, I just really want to start the meeting with just a giant thank you to all of our teachers, all of our staff, all of our administrators. All of you are working incredibly hard under difficult situations, and just can't thank you enough for the work that you're doing, for the difference that you are all making every day. So really, really thank you. Appreciate everything you do every single day. So let's go ahead and start with the Pledge of Allegiance. If we can please rise, and Marita has our American flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, item 3.03, Superintendent Summary. Dr. Seifert, I will hand it to you.
Thank you, Josh. Welcome everyone to tonight's Board of Education meeting. We are on Zoom and virtual for tonight's meeting. I hope everyone had a happy and safe Thanksgiving. It's hard to believe we are in the month of December. We are in the holiday season and winter break is just around the corner. We are hoping to have another Benton Talk podcast episode before winter break, so stay tuned. Hopefully that will happen next week. Dr. Lewis, Chris Bennett, and myself will hopefully have some good updates and have a great episode for you. The district social justice and equity team, about 40 to 50 staff members, met for the second time a couple of weeks ago, and a smaller group within the team are basically leading our planning process and setting up our PD and training for the whole entire team. A book study library has also been established, some fantastic books that we'll be reading and studying and discussing together. We want to set a solid foundation of social justice and equity before we go any further, and we're excited about the work that is ahead. Our second semester learning format assignments, teachers, class lists, and scheduling are currently being shared with families. As stated in my last letter to families, some K-8 students could have a different teacher due to the mass changes made, as many families took the opportunity to change the learning format. We understand that teachers aren't changing teachers isn't ideal. However, we've done everything we can to accommodate everyone's choices and their needs, and must keep in-person class sizes within our district approved numbers that we have in policy. We take pride in the fact that we are continuing to be able to offer a choice in learning for our families, serving students in person and virtually. We appreciate everyone's understanding and support as we work to accommodate all families' learning needs for the second semester. Just an interesting note, learning needs for the second semester, actually we saw about a 10% uptick in in-person learning. So we're about 80% in-person and 20% virtual going into the second semester. Our winter sports season has begun. At our girls' turkey tip-off game, the Warriors held off the late run by the Lady Pirates for the win. It was a great game. It was just awesome to see our girl teams on the court competing. Both wrestling teams have been in action with matches, and our boys basketball teams are starting to have games this week as well. And our girls swimming season has started too. So go Pirates and roll Tribe. We'll be discussing, updating 3 important items tonight: a proposal to revise the school calendar in December, revised bond issue proposal for 2021 in spring, and then also our COVID update tonight. I want to continue to encourage and thank our Board of Education, staff members, students, parents, and community members for all of their continued work, support, and dedication to the SCSD. We are all essential. Now is the time to continue to be united together. We will get through this season of great challenges by working together. And again, Josh, you started off this meeting with just saying thank you. I'm so thankful for our staff, our families, for you all, for who we serve on the board, and just serve our families. And and it's unbelievable. We're in December and we're still teaching virtually and in person. On behalf of the SCSD Board of Education, Central Office team, District Administration team, and our entire staff, we want to wish everyone a very happy and healthy holiday season. And I think we're all looking forward to a new year. Thank you, Josh.
Thank you, Dr. Seifert. Appreciate it. We are now at item 3.04, board communications. Leslie.
Good evening, everybody. The only communications I have to report is we have received several emails from teachers, community members, parents regarding the new CDC guidelines, which I know we're going to talk about later. But those are the only communications I have to report.
All right, thank you. Item 3.05, audience comments. We did not receive any audience comments, so we will move right into 3.06. May I have a motion to amend or adopt the agenda? And I believe Ellen would like to take that.
Yeah, I would like to move that we amend the agenda to remove item 4.07 from the consent agenda. I want to have a little philosophical discussion about preschool tuition rates, and I will be brief.
All right. May somebody would have to second it.
I second
I'll
it.
second. Oh.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, motion carries. So now we need a motion, please, to adopt the amended agenda.
I move that we adopt the amended agenda. Malone.
I second.
That,
Towers.
All in favor?
Aye.
aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. 4.01, for efficiency, the school board utilizes a consent agenda. Items placed on the consent agenda are routine in nature or are among the many decisions that the board has already determined are in the domain of the administration. May I have a motion to approve the, amended consent agenda?
I move we approve the amended consent agenda.
I second.
Malone.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. All right, item 5.01, which is now 4.07, preschool tuition rates. Ellen, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I fully agree with the 10% reduction in the total tuition for staff. But the new reduction, 10% for families with multiple children, that would mean a loss of several $1,000s per family. Is it cheaper to educate 2 kids from one family as opposed to 2 kids from separate families? I'm just wondering if this is a smart financial move.
So the tuition rates, depending upon if a child is half day or full day, and depending upon the number of days they attend per week, make our annual tuition range between $3,100 a year and $6,450 for the proposed year. So obviously, if we did have a 10% reduction, then 10% of the family's total bill, if they have twins, if they have multiple children, obviously that comes into play. We look at all of our revenue streams, including tuition, to make sure that preschool is a self-sustaining operation. We've done that ever since we started. So with the exception of last year when we had the closure for COVID, preschool has been able to maintain the the revenue necessary to cover all of our teachers and paraprofessionals, salaries and benefits, miscellaneous things like that. Obviously, when we opened our new center, there were some additional expenses that have come into play too. However, this is a competitive strategy. Many preschools offer a sibling discount. It is also one of the areas that we've heard over the years as we've communicated with families on how we can continue to be competitive and attractive to families. The sibling discount is the piece that has come up. And so that's why we're adding it in. We don't have a massive amount of families that have 2 children in preschool at the same time, but when you do have twins and things like that, it does tend to happen. And as you see it, the price of preschool for families that are paying full tuition, it gets pretty pricey pretty quick for them. I think the other piece that we need to keep in play here too are that we have a good portion of our students that attend free of charge to the families. So their tuition is paid 100% by either early childhood special education funds, if they qualify for that, or through title funds, if they meet that criteria. So the reduction would only be for those full paying tuition families that would meet the criteria of having multiple siblings.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Every once in a while we hear, you know, I don't remember if it's state or federal level, but every once in a while we hear, you know, the idea of helping fund more early childhood education across. Do we know, is there anything on the horizon with incoming administrations? Are we aware of anything like that?
I haven't heard anything
No.
recently, Charles.
No, I mean, unless the federal government were to print some money and send it our way, there's the state does not have the funds to move towards universal preschool, nor any funding mechanism to that, you know, they might consider. So I think the only way we'd ever see it would be federal, and we don't have any real indication as of yet. Danielle's office, Heather Sheets, works with our federal programs, and we really don't know where they're going with next year's budget at all.
All right. Well, thank you. So in that case, we do need a motion, please, for item 4.07. Which would be to approve the preschool tuition rates as presented.
I move we approve the preschool tuition rates as presented.
Second.
I'll second. Night.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. All right. Item 6.01, Donna, I'm going to leave this up to you again because of my day job. I cannot participate in these discussions. So Donna, I will let you lead it.
Okay. And I have no, I can't see the agenda because I didn't print it out. So this is item.
It's 6.01, Donna, bond issue.
The bond issue.
So Charles, you're probably going to be telling us a little bit on this one and then we discuss it.
Yeah, so after last month, I went back when met with Josh Schaefer, our Director of Facilities, who you see has joined us this evening again, and also Jason and Chris Bennett, our Communications Coordinator. And so we reassessed the bond issue projects. And so what you have are 2 documents that we can, one of which I know we'll want to pull up. The second one is the list of priorities. And so when Jason and Josh and Ellen and I and other members of the CO team, staff, community all got together with DHA, we ended up with a list of 36 priorities. And so I've included those tonight. As you look at that document, there are some of in fact, a rather large number of them that are in orange or yellow. And those would be projects that we probably would not be able to do if we determined to do a lower amount on our bond issue. All of those projects would be included if we went with the $49.7 million initial total that we talked about last month. And so I can take whatever direction you would like for me to, Donna, as far as either going through the presentation again very briefly, or letting you all talk about, the timeliness of offering the issue before we even do that.
Well, for the other board members, I mean, I've seen the chart, but I can't see it right now.
Mm-hmm.
Do any of you want to see the chart with the items that were lined out, and or is it okay to just discuss from your recollections, or maybe you're looking at it? What do you want? Just go ahead and discuss it.
Well, I can have Chris bring up either of the documents. The one is the listing of projects, but associated with goals of the district that we put together. And then the other is just the list of prioritized items that we worked on with our architects.
So
It's Leslie. I would like to know, because I'm with Donna, I can't see it right now. Where is alternative school on this list?
In the initial proposal, Leslie, there is under goal 2, improving instructional and activity areas. The Success Campus is listed on that list for some upgrades in their building. Actually, we listed that under goal 3, safety, security, and functionality, to make the Success Campus code compliant for egress and fire escape. And then we also have some additional funds for lighting, HVAC, and electrical work in that building. That is one of the projects, though, if we went with a smaller size issue, that we would probably want to cut out.
Okay.
So I'm trying to understand again. I think I looked this over obviously before the meeting, but now I question, you reduce the amount that we're asking, and that really wasn't my issue when I made an issue at the last meeting.
Mm-hmm.
My issue was more about the choice of what we're using that money for.
Right.
And then, so now I have to ask, Leslie, when you say alternative school, do you mean alternative school that we keep talking about and nothing ever gets done in general? Or do you mean the Success Campus?
No, I mean the alternative school that we keep talking about.
The one that we keep talking about, but not necessarily Success School.
Dr. Seifert, you might want to jump in with where that committee's work is then on that issue.
Well, and board members, you've gotten updates from me. So we've started our meetings. We have a great committee that's meeting, and you've seen all the updates. I've sent it to you. We've met. We were supposed to meet today, but unfortunately, some of our committee members were out sick today or had to take sick time or quarantine. So we had to not meet today, but our first order of business with that group is to really solidify what we're doing for this summer and minding the gap of where we are with credit recovery for our kids that are struggling now, to make sure, well, this spring and the summer, so kids can graduate or be able to graduate on time. So that's one first order of the business. But that committee, and I've said this in my PGP goals, as well as you and I've had, and you've seen the updates, but we're starting to have those conversations of what the alternative education planning and the programming looks like for the future. And it does include the Success Campus. We're not anywhere near to say this is specifically what it looks like, but that building and that program will be a starting point for us. We have credit recovery in that building. We like to see credit recovery probably going into the high schools, and then going back to the high schools, and then using that building for more of a full-time program for kids. There's a lot of planning, a lot of conversation, and a lot of discussing that has to still come through. But we are starting that process, and we're going to see hopefully some good progress with that. But right now, there's no plans to build or buy new property for that. We're going to use what we have and see what we can come up with within our RTI process with with the recovery, hopefully the credit recovery, some of that going back into the buildings and then using that facility. That's why we've done some things to success to make sure it's a viable building for us. So there are things getting done. There are things having conversations, but again, with COVID hitting and with the pandemic, now we're looking, we have to kind of take a pause on what the future programming looks like, because we've got some real concerns with our kids that need credit recovery more so than ever in terms of getting them to graduate on time here in the next 2 or 3 years.
So my understanding then is that we cannot use this bond issue money. Let's say, okay, we're not going to build a new building for alternative school right now, at least, we're not thinking about that. But we cannot use some of that bond money in order to come up with a curriculum and, teachers and so on like that, or not?
That's correct, Marita. That all comes out of our operating budget. And so bond funds are restricted to only facilities, technology projects, transportation projects, those large capital project and improvements.
Dr. Brazil, and you guys saw the presentation last time, and Ellen was a part of it. We've gone through a very specific process to get the actual projects and the actual bond issue that we presented last meeting to you, so you know exactly where we're headed with building improvements and structures. And so when we're talking about programming and different things with alternative education, that's a separate thing at this point. And again, we're starting those conversations, but that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about the bond issue at this point.
And so at this point, one of the things related to that Success Campus building is we were purposeful in trying to address issues that would make the building more usable regardless of where that alternative ed discussion went, so that we weren't boxing ourselves into like one particular way of offering programs, because we knew that this discussion about building improvements was going to have to precede where we were on programming. So we were careful in talking with Chris and her team to make sure that we just addressed the basics of bringing that building up to code, providing them with better classroom spaces.
I don't want to monopolize the conversation here, but since I was probably the biggest barker at the last meeting over this, I never believe in asking for less money if we can get more. So, so if we can get more money, if we're going to have a bond issue, then I think we should ask for as much as we can, as long as, Charles, like you did this time round, I had a much better understanding of how all these changes might fit into some type of goal or something like that, or something that would be appropriate. Like obviously technology is most appropriate for COVID-19. And so it rang a little bit more clearly when I saw those goals. Mm-hmm. So in light of saying that, I'd rather ask for more money than less money.
I kind of agree with Marie. I kind of agree with you about making a bond issue more palatable to our community. The things, cutting out things, I don't think that change in the amount would significantly change a voter. And it's a no tax increase, whether we ask for the original amount or whether it's this new lowered amount.
That's true, Donna. And it doesn't really make a difference in the tax rate. We would just be able to pay it off a little more quickly if we asked for less. But in terms of the taxpayer, it doesn't make a difference in their bill either way.
And I think the other important thing that I took away last time was that as any good homeowner, just making sure that your property is maintained, and you've pointed out, we're already on a maintenance kind of a schedule. Mm-hmm. And Josh, who's being very, very quiet, but we have.
You might have been told to.
Oh.
unless called out. Don't speak unless spoken to.
Gosh, I just called him out. It seemed the items that we had seemed appropriate and needed. Nothing on there was, in my way of thinking, fluff.
Mhm.
So
Well, and a couple of the things also that were brought up that I thought were honestly legitimate questions last time were, are these projects, how do they tie into our overall goals? And so that's why we put everything under one of four goals. The first one is learning during the pandemic and beyond, which is mostly technology related items. The second was improving instructional facilities and spaces. And those are the things that we really relied on our principals to come up with. The third area was safety and security for our buildings. We still have some of those things that we need to be addressing across the district. And then the fourth is not fourth because it's less important. It's just the fourth one on the list, which is energy efficiency and savings. And so specifically after the meeting, Ellen asked if I would get some information about the LED lighting item, because that's one of the things that several of you mentioned, had a pretty high price tag on it. And
but we
so,
save money.
Yeah. And so Josh actually did all the work on that with a couple of vendor partners to provide us with updated pricing on that. And so you see there's an initial price tag district-wide of almost $4.4 million. But for putting that investment in, right now, Ameren will pay us an estimated $315,000 immediately in rebates. And then we begin saving almost $260,000 every year on the electric bill for those devices. And so that's many of our projects, it's hard to attach a return on investment. So, if you, for instance, the project at Null, where we'd potentially add a storm shelter and gymnasium, that has real value, but it's hard to quantify in dollars. But if you look at the LED lighting, we can estimate pretty closely that these fixtures that have on average a 15-year lifespan, we would start making legitimately making money, saving money at about the 8-year mark. We because of the reductions in energy cost from running those fixtures. So
I think that's
just a little extra that we added in.
That's a significant point that if we do proceed with a bond issue, that's one thing that the public needs to really be aware of, that these are all what I said, to maintain all of the facilities, the technology, those four goals, plus we'll be saving money for the taxpayers. It seems
The
like
other area, that whole area of energy efficiency has realistic savings involved. For instance, another one of the projects that we didn't ask the engineers to go back and price, but that we know makes a big difference, is Harris has the original equipment that was put in to heat and cool that building in 1993. If we replace that with 2021 equipment, then we'll have a significant increase in efficiency, which will again reduce our initial utility bills, heat and cool the building at a better rate. So, those types of things, we're always looking to do that. But specific to LED lighting, where there was such a high price tag on it, we wanted to make sure we got some actual ROI numbers on it for you.
And the other thing that I want to make sure we all, because I wasn't aware of it until you pointed it out last time, that maintaining our facilities, if we don't do it through a bond issue, then it's going to come out of our operating money, which
Right.
takes away money for other things we need to do for our students and for our schools. So the
So
bond issue,
that's a legitimate point, Donna, and it's one that is real, but I don't want us to overstate it. So for
Okay.
instance, at Benton, we have heat pumps that were in the building before we renovated it into administration. So they're reaching end of life. If we replace those, not only do we get higher efficiency units that will actually save us some money, but we also know that our two HVAC techs are going to spend less time servicing those items, we'll spend less on maintenance. So it's a fraction of what the cost of the new is. The real savings of new fixtures or new HVAC comes over the life of that unit, where we just have reduced gas or electric bills associated with each item. Is that fair, Josh?
I have a question. How did we satisfy the requirement that we seek input from members of the community? Was at the meetings? Who were the members of the community that we got input from?
So that's a good question, Ellen. So we asked our principals as they were getting their teams together to invite some parents, some community people, and in some cases, those were also staff members in other buildings who had children, but that lived in the district. But we specifically on each building team, whether they were able to come to those meetings in October or not, did get input from parents and outside stakeholders.
About how many?
I'd say probably a quarter to a third of the folks that were involved.
Okay.
Each of those teams was 4 to 6. So in some cases there were 2, some cases only 1 of the 4.
Okay.
So I have a question. First of all, as a taxpayer, I love 2 words: efficiency and savings.
Right.
You know, so if you could really, I mean, we're looking for ways to sell this, and that would maybe sell it for me, but something else would sell for me too. In hearing teachers and parents and all the emails that we've been getting and so on like that, I wonder if we have the best ventilation for the students and the teachers in all the classrooms. I mean, where they could open windows. If they can't open windows, do they have fans or do they have air, ventilation systems or something? I mean, that's something that we could, and I don't think that's true from what I'm hearing, that we have, everything is copacetic. So I would like that to be part of this.
So Josh, can you address just a little bit about what HVAC equipment in general does in that regard, as far as in other issues related to COVID?
Yeah, so just real quick, ASHRAE is Association for Heating, Refrigeration, Air Conditioning Engineers. They have a certain standard that says, 5 to 6 air exchanges per hour. And during COVID, we've actually upped that to 10. And I've had some of our maintenance and HVAC technicians in and out of buildings and making sure that those set points are being reached and being met.
And so, Josh, just to interrupt for a second. So again, board, that's the equipment itself is causing the turnover of fresh air in the buildings, whether we have windows open or not. And so that's something that occupants of the building might not be aware of, but it is happening multiple times a day. So go ahead, Josh.
Yeah, we've actually improved our filtration too. We were actually using a really good filter too. So in the beginning of the year, after we came back from COVID leave on August 27th, that was one of the things I took a real deep dive and looked at, is our filtration, and make sure, hey, we're going to have kids back here. We're going to have students and staff back here. I want to check on our hourly air exchanges and what our filtration looks like. We're using a top-notch filter. And when people ask, hey, I want air purifiers in our rooms, in our classrooms, or in our spaces, I pushed back on that a little bit and said, we have the means in place already to do this. You just don't see it. So
you're comfortable in saying all of our schools have the appropriate ventilation, even if a teacher has a classroom that has no windows?
I don't know if I'm.
You say if they have up-to-date HVAC in the building, Marita, yes, they do. But yes. I think that's where Josh's hesitation was, is in some of our buildings, we're still not up to, the new enough units that we would have forced air turnover in all of those spaces. So that is an ongoing goal as we replace systems.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay. Thank you.
Any more discussion on our bond issue?
By the way, just related to timing, and I think Jason told you this in one of your board updates, but we talked a little bit about is April the right time? And again, I'd tell you from my chair, I think it is, just because it's a school election, and so people that are generally interested in what we're doing come to vote in April. So I think that's always a great time to offer bond issues like this one. But the other dates for elections in 2021 won't happen unless someone like us or another local government entity asks for a specific election date. And so to discourage us from doing that, the legislature has required that a 4/7 majority is what we need to pass a bond issue in April. But in non-general election years, which is the odd years, it goes up to 2/3 majority in any other election date. So we could have that election in June, August, or November of 2021, but we'd have a higher threshold to pass it. So at least in my common minds, as I reason that out, it seems like we need to go in April, or we would have to put it off probably a whole year.
So Jason, okay, so actually we got a couple of things to vote on here or something, don't we? But Jason,
I think we need to decide if we're going to have a bond issue, and then we have to decide on a date.
yeah, and then, so then Jason, my question is, as I said, I would like to get as much money as we can, in this bond issue. And I know you reduced the amount, which was never my intent. And I wonder if it can go back up.
So Marita, they're actually in that bond issue presentation, they're actually two together. The first one has the full initial amount in it of just under 50 million.
Okay.
And then the second one is that reduced amount. So if you look at the first one, it's still at 49,957,500.
Okay.
So if we want to vote on having a bond issue, then make sure you state your motion so that you're specific about which bond issue, whether it's that 49 million or it's the reduced one of.
Well, and I would suggest, Donna, if I could, that again, I think somebody said it, we probably have a two-prong here. And so ultimately, you're going to need a motion to offer the bond issue in April of 2021, and for what amount? And but if I would suggest that we offer it for 50 million, not 49,957,500, or we offer it for 37 million, which is that lower amount that would cull out some of the projects.
Leslie, did you?
Leslie? It's Leslie. Can I interrupt? Zoom is very difficult for me. I never know when to interrupt. I would like to go back probably 11 minutes. I appreciate this entire conversation and the building upgrades and the LED lighting, and I really do appreciate all these kind of structural enhancements and how they will save us money, blah, blah, blah. I don't mean blah, blah, blah sarcastically. I just mean to make it short. But I mean, I want to go back to the alternative school, because when we did our CSD planning, I mean, that was the one thing teachers, parents, students, we all agreed on. That's something this district needs. It's something this district wants. Teachers want it, parents want it, people want it. I just feel like we're getting lost, or maybe, I don't know, but I feel like, again, we've been talking about this for a long time, since, almost since I've been on the board. I just want to know, like, where it falls in priority. I understand that there's another committee being formed and we're talking about it. I understand we're talking about it. I just want to know, like, how high of a priority is this for the district?
Leslie, let me jump in and let you know, and if I haven't been clear, I apologize, but I've given you about 2 or 3 different updates the last month on where we are with the committee and what we're starting with. And it's not an excuse, but we're in the middle of a pandemic and we're really trying to meet kids' needs where they're at right now. But if I haven't made it clear in my updates and or my own PGP and telling you that the alternative education plan, as well as in our CSIP, that it's in a very high priority. It is not on this bond issue because we're not ready to build a building or looking at physical attributes for something that we would need for programming at this point. And I know you don't like discussing and talking, but that's where we're at this point. And the committee that has been formed is going to be looking at all aspects of our programming. But right now we are in dire needs of making sure that we're meeting needs of our kids right now in the middle of a pandemic who are flunking and who need help with credit recovery. Our plan is, again, the base plan will be to eventually get to the point, and it's a high priority at some point to very quickly in the near future. It will not happen next year, but the planning will happen this year and in the next year to look at the credit recovery program, get it back into the high schools, and then use that facility and the staff that we have there. That's the premise and the thought right now, that we would start using, hopefully in 22, 23 probably, a full-time program, full day for kids in an alternative setting. There's a lot of work that needs to be done, but that's how we're moving forward, and it's a top priority. It is not in this bond issue because it has nothing to do with it at this point.
But I would say, Jason, though, it's in the bond issue in the fact that we are not ignoring the building that we're currently using for alternative education. We're not ignoring any of our other buildings. And so whether that alternative program goes into the Success building or not, we're going to need that building to be useful. And we have right now a little extra room at West High. So potentially we could have alternative programming there, or we could have alternative programming in another building. But so I think, Leslie, to your point, I mean, we don't have the programming piece answered yet, but we are trying to be diligent in making sure that the buildings that we have are going to be ready for use, depending on how that committee finally brings a recommendation to the board, how we address those needs, whether it's next year or, on into the future.
But so in the several year future, right? So
we're hoping within if it is not, it's not next year, the year after that, but we are on the process of planning that. Yes.
Well, because it sounds like to me that the Success building, just making sure it's on this bond issue, making sure our Success building will be suitable perhaps to be an alternative school once we have programming and all the other stuff in place. We're not going to be looking out, I don't think, for a separate building. We have a building. When we can move credit recovery into our high schools, we'll have a building that would be a dedicated alternative high school with staff. And so we have next year, as you said, Jason and Charles, that the planning of it is what we need to do now.
Well, and let me clarify, I said next year or on into the future, not meaning that I'm in any way implying that that committee's work is not going to get done. Jason is leading that with Julie and Danielle and lots of good input from our staff. I'm just saying from a facility standpoint, we want all of our facilities, regardless of their current use, to be updated. That's that stewardship theme again, to make sure that whether it's the Success building or any of our other buildings, that they're in good shape for the next generation of learning.
Let me make sure I understand everybody clear. So in other words, we are going to upgrade Success, the campus itself, because eventually we're going to move credit recovery back to the high school, and the Success campus becomes an actual alternative school for those who so desire or need that form of learning. In other words, this half-day credit recovery that we have right now is going to be sent back to the homeschool?
That is the initial thought. That is what we're working on. Leslie, this is a huge process and a huge change in our programming. We have a lot to talk about, a lot to get to. So I'm just telling you that is where I'm at and where I think we need to head, and to make sure that we're ready to go in the future. And again, this committee that we have formed for alternative education programming has to has to, at this point, really make sure we know what we're doing to meet kids' needs right now, because we have a very huge issue with kids falling behind in credit recovery as we speak. And so we have to, we're getting that in planning, that plan in place right now. Now, I'm telling you, this is not the place or the time during this bond issue discussion to say, oh, success is going to turn into this. But the thought is right now is, how do we use the building space we already have? We have the programming, which is credit recovery, and is it necessarily being useful the best way it is right now? Our teachers are doing a great job, but is there space to take that back to the high school? That is not a done deal, but that is the thought. Then we have a building to use. What we're doing with success right now, and we have done in the past with bond issues, is to keep it a viable school building and keep it running smoothly. And so then when we're ready to do something different, we're ready to do that. I don't want to put a box on any of this programming or restraints, because I don't know, who knows what this programming is going to bring. It's going to get exciting, but it's a big process, and we've started that process. But there's a lot going on right now with student needs that we have to address. But that is the thought. That is the actual thought of where we think we want to head. But that's not a done deal either. There's a lot of processes that have to be in place, and a lot of conversations that need to take place, and discussions and research and with the committee before we're ready to say that's exactly what we're doing. But that is the thought of where we want to head.
Okay. I just want to make sure that it's on the radar, that it's staying on the radar.
Well, and again, I mean this with all sincerity. You've seen, I've put it in about three, at least 2 or 3 of the weekly board updates the last 2 or 3 weeks. And I just talked about it two months in a row in my personal growth plan. I mean, it is on, I'm hoping it's clear enough that it is on the radar. I have been discussing it, and I have been updating you all on where we're at. We're not where we want to be, and it is a slow process, but it is on our radar, and we are meeting and we are working through it.
Okay. Understood. And with all sincerity, it doesn't mean we don't have a conversation about it. I understand you're communicating, but this is my arena to communicate.
But there's a concern. But when I hear that there's a concern that it's not on the radar, that's where I'm saying is I don't know what else to say or do when I feel like I am telling you it's on the radar and I'm updating you weekly on it.
Okay, so I think we have information about the item on the agenda right now on the bond issue that I think, if it's all right, I'm going to see if there's a motion.
Yeah, Donna, I'm sorry, but I have to interrupt on this because this is for, I guess, Charles and Jason, but I'm trying to understand. You know, I made a big stink last month on the 50 million because I didn't like, even though I realized there was a committee that came with this, you know, I didn't feel that it was really speaking to the community, that $50 million, the way it was set up. So then Jason, Charles, Josh, and so on go back to the drawing board, and they make things more logical for us. They gave us goals and so on like that. So we're really, so those goals are the only reason why I would vote for the 50 million, but I am asking that the things that you decided to cut out originally, if we went for the lesser amount, that we make them the lowest on our priority. Is that possible?
That would be the way we would work it, Marita. And so if the board approves offering a $50 million bond issue in April of 2021, and if our taxpayers approve it, then we would already, obviously before that, they'd have a list of bond issue projects, the bones of which you've seen. We'd also probably make one for each individual building. So every building, if there's somebody that, you know, is specifically interested in that campus, they could see what would be on that list, but we would endeavor to get them all. But absolutely, we would make those higher priority items, make sure we got those before we got to the lower priority items. Yes.
So what you cut out for this lower one, for this lower bond issue, bond amount, what you cut out then would go to the bottom of your pile, and you would be able to take everything that you have in all $50 million there, you would able to put everything under a certain goal so that the people can see how it's related to what we're trying
Yes,
to
it's all on that first 5 pages of the presentation. That's all $50 million of the projects under one of the 4 goals.
Okay, as long as you can do that, then I'm for it. Yeah.
And as we went back to the drawing board, we heard take out some fluff, take some things out. So we try to do that. And we also, when you talk about the goals, if you look at that presentation, Chris Bennett's already been working on for us. It's very clear what the goals are in the overview of it. And we've gotten very consistent. And then for us to come back this month was to say, here's what you can do, basically 49. Here's what you can do for 34 or so. Which way do you want to go? And right now, through the process that we have come up with, the goals and the projects that are in the bond issue, those are the things we're discussing right now. Those are the things that are that we can use this money for, and that's why that's what we should be discussing at this point, and it's very specific in that presentation.
Okay, thank you.
How long will it take to pay off the bond?
So Ellen, this would be a 20-year general obligation bond issue. So that's kind of the standard, unless there's some reason that we would want to seek a longer or shorter amortization schedule. But by doing it in 20 years, we layer it in so that actually, I can show you the amortization tables at some point, but if you look at the 2014 bonds, the 2017 bonds, and then this issue, they don't all have like an even flow, but we kind of put them in so that the overall debt payment remains about the same. But then in another 3 or 4 years, we would have the ability to offer another bond issue so that we get to those goals that right now are on that 4 to 7 year list.
Okay. Yes,
Like
Marita.
a motion? Would you like a motion?
Yes, thanks.
I move to approve an April 2021, bond issue.
For how much? For 50,000? 50 million?
Do it all for 50 million.
I
Is there-
second.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? So we have approved offering a bond issue for $50 million in April of 2021.
Mhm. So then next month, I'll actually have the actual ballot language. Our bond attorneys have to draft that, and then you officially as the board have to approve that before we can go and ask the county to put that on for us. But we'll do that at our next meeting.
And that gives us enough time. We're on schedule.
Yes,
On a
ma'am.
time
That's
schedule.
about our January meeting is about 10 days before the deadline. So that'll give us plenty of time.
Okay. Okay. Well then, thank you. And it looks like our fearless leader is back. So Josh, I'm handing it back to you.
All right. Thank you, Donna. Very much appreciate it. Now the main attraction for the night, item 7.01, COVID update. Jason, are we throwing it to you or Julie?
Yes, I'm going to start with it. I want to start by saying there's about a 20-page slide. Hopefully you had a chance to look at it before the board meeting. Julie McClard's done a great job of putting this together. We kind of call her our COVID czar. And we're going to get through this very quickly for you. And hopefully you saw bullet points. We feel like we have a presentation to simply give you the facts and simply let you know exactly kind of where we've come from, where we're at, why we got here, and kind of where we think we're headed. There's not necessarily a motion tonight, but I also wanted to open up a conversation, or at least there's a specific question tonight that I think at some point you'll have to answer, not necessarily tonight in a motion, but in January, and we'll probably need to have another conversation. And so we will, hopefully we can get through this and it's very clear for you. And I will say this is a very emotional, very exhausting time for our staff, our families, our students, for us, for all involved. And And when you make a change in the middle of a pandemic, when you make a change in general these days, it seems like it's tough, right? But now in a pandemic, it's really hard to make a change. And so I just want to make sure you've seen a lot of this information. I've given you a lot of this information. You see everything from obviously the SCA is involved, and they did a survey that we sent directly to you, and you've seen their feedback, and there's been some emails and some information sent to board members from their members. And so we just want to make sure that you can see in one presentation. That's why we made an agenda item for tonight. So hopefully really be clear again, where we come from, kind of what the background is a little bit, where we're at, and then some specific details. And I'm hoping everybody at home and you all would just be able to, this is a really clear picture of what and why we're doing things. And so with that, I'm going to, Julie's going to help me with this. Our whole central office team's worked on this, but Julie's really done a great job. Let me just say this. Julie takes care of all of our student issues with COVID, and Ronnie takes care of all of our staff issues with COVID. And then our nurses are doing an extremely unbelievable job in our buildings, and our administrators are doing an unbelievable job. Contact tracing, the antigen testing, you name it. We'll talk about all of it tonight, but kudos to our staff. And then we've already talked, I think, in closed session tonight about how awesome our building secretaries have been to fill positions. So, and then our teachers are filling positions. So it's kind of a one full circle. We're hoping to get through this presentation for you tonight, so you have exactly what you need to know as we move forward. Julie, I'll let you go with slide 2. Chris, can you pull it up, please?
Mm-hmm.
I should have started that with that, sorry.
That's all right. That's all right.
We're on slide 2.
And I hope you like our pretty graphics that I found.
Yeah.
All right.
Big.
Chris, can you just put it on like a
Full screen or?
yeah.
That's good.
Thank you. Okay, let me make my thing here a little bit smaller. Okay, so I just kind of wanted to start a little bit with like background as to kind of how things have changed since from the beginning of the year to now, as far as the St. Charles County Department of Public Health like prioritizing, because I think at first our schools were really the priority, and now it seems like not that we're less prioritized, but I think a lot of the day-to-day work is kind of we're taking care of it and giving the information to them. So, so the priority now is more of the high-risk populations, people over the age of 65, those in those congregate settings like nursing homes, outbreaks, and any other groups with underlying conditions. So, health department is actually no longer making personal contact with those under 21. They're using the school information that our staff is sending in, filling out and sending in order to set dates for quarantine and release. So this all comes electronically to our parents and staff members and students. So basically whenever we have a case, they're doing the contact tracing, and they're putting a lot of information into a spreadsheet. They're sending it to the health department, and it like downloads into their system and then creates kind of a database, and then they send emails and things like that from that piece. All right, Chris. You want to go to the next one? This was just.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Sorry, excuse me. Could you back up one, please? Based on the new CDC guidance, how new is that?
This is from the last time we met with the health department, which was probably right before Thanksgiving. So that was guidance they were given on who to prioritize.
Okay.
So I don't truly know. I know that's what the health department actually gave us. This slide is straight out of the one that they went over with us, saying that they were told that this is how the priorities were going to be handled. This was right, Jason, when you say maybe it was the Friday before Thanksgiving is maybe about the time we got this information.
Yes.
And you know, I hate to prolong things, but I'm trying to get this clear because we have a lot of people that are interested. So Jason, is this the one that that you're going to a meeting on December the 21st, or?
No, this is all this is telling you is who they're prioritizing that they're looking at. What I'm doing on the 21st has to do with what they're doing with quarantining in general from 14 to 10. We'll get to that later in the presentation.
Yeah.
So
This is just a little bit of background as to kind of where they're going, where they went with a
This is
modified.
sequential. So we have it in order. So we're going to get to that point. We're not to that point yet.
okay, I'm just trying to understand the slides.
This is background information for where we think we're headed and where we're going.
And Julie, my question is so what you're showing here on the slide. This is the CDC recommendation, or is this local?
This is not a recommendation. This is just showing that what their prioritization is and who they're focused on. That's all that is.
But who's they is what I'm asking.
The St. Charles
Health
County
Department based on the
Department of Health.
CDC guidance.
The St. Charles County Department of Health.
Or
Yes, hold on. It says recent updates this is from the Department of Health from the St. Charles County, based on the CDC guidance.
based on, okay, thank you.
And this is tracing. This isn't quarantine. This is just who are they keeping track of versus they're using our data to keep track. This isn't quarantine. This is just who are they keeping track of.
Yes,
exactly. And we just wanted to make sure it was clear that the background information we've got from them lately is they're not so much focused on the under 21 at this point. It's that higher level at this point.
Because at the beginning of the year, anytime we turned in that information, there were fewer cases. And so they were able to make like actual phone calls and like contact with each person that we turned in to them as a contact or a positive or anything. With the number of cases with it rising so much, they've had to kind of prioritize who are they making direct contact with and who are they just kind of like keeping tabs on more electronically. And if Chris, if you go to the next screen, the reason that they are going more, or the next screen, Chris, if the reason they're going electronically more for the younger kids is because those aren't the ones that are dying. Those aren't the ones that are having really a rough time out there. There's a lot of cases, but they're not the ones that are more likely to end up in the hospital. So they're spending more time on the phone and more time making direct contact with that older population than they are with the under 21. They're still keeping track of the under 21, but again, like I said, it's more through electronic means. So, and I can get into this a little more as we go along in the slides, but we have like a new, as of Monday, we have access. I have access and all of our nurses have access to their actual Eradicate database through the health department. So because it's all electronic, I can get on and see, okay, this student who tested positive or is in quarantine, this is the date of release. This is what they give them an email with a link within the email that they're supposed to go into daily and do their their health checks. So it'll say, hey, do you have a fever? What's your temperature? Do you have chills? Do you have this, that, and the other? I can actually physically see that in the system now. So they know that we're keeping a little bit of a track of like our own students and whatever. So their focus has kind of turned more on that older group. That's all I was trying to say by these last two slides. Okay, so that's just more of their focus. It has nothing to do with contact tracing and quarantining and all that. Okay, Chris, can you go to the next slide? Okay, these are some other updates that from the health department. And again, this has all come within the past 2 or so weeks. And like I already said, the health department can't keep up with so many new cases that we're actually putting them on a spreadsheet. It's being sent straight into the database pretty much. They're downloading into their system, which then generates a quarantine letter with a release date on it. So we used to get a quarantine letter that said this, or they would get a quarantine letter saying this child has been quarantined or this staff member's been quarantined. And then as long as they checked into the system and answered those questions, they would get a release letter the day that they were being released at like 4 o'clock in the morning. And then we would ask for that release letter in order for them to come back to school. Well, they changed that at the beginning of November. I think it was November 9th to be exact, where they only do one letter. So now if you get quarantined, you get a quarantine letter that says, Josh Keene has been quarantined for this reason or whatever. This is your estimated date of release. And so as long as you meet these criteria, you can be released on this date, and you self-release yourself is what they're doing now, because they just can't keep up with the number of cases. So as long as they're doing that. And then what we decided to do in order to kind of like put in a little extra layer of security there is that we have our nurses or someone in our school buildings call those children or call those parents the day before they come back and make sure that they are asking them, hey, do you have a fever? Are your symptoms getting better? They're asking those questions prior to having them come back in the building. So that's just something that we added ourselves. They also said that a negative test does not speed anything up. It does not mean anything. Yes, we want people to get tested, but a negative test or a positive test doesn't get you, or a negative test doesn't get you out of quarantine. And only the health department can dictate those release dates. So you can't go to the doctor and say, hey, my doctor wrote me a note and says I can be out of quarantine on December 10th, even though the health department says the 14th. That is not okay. So like I said, we now can check on the progress. We can check on the dates for students and staff in our district, which is very, very helpful. Rodney came up to my office this morning and we looked up a lot of our staff members, and we got information on when they're gonna be released so that we can kind of plan ahead and plan ahead for subs and finding out when people are able to get back into the building sooner. Previously, when the families didn't get those letters, we had to contact the health department, email them, say so-and-so didn't get a letter, can you please send it? Where now we can get in and see if that person is in the system and if there's a anticipated date in there. So it's really seemed to make things a lot easier, and that just started on Monday. Okay, Chris. So the very recent updates, this kind of stirred up a little bit of emotion with people, is the modified quarantine. And and personally, I don't really have a there's parts of me that think that this is great. There's parts of me that worry about it. So I think that you kind of have to look at the whole picture behind this. You have to know all the details behind this kind of before you kind of make a decision on what you think is best. But basically what they have shown through data was that there's very limited transmission in schools with mask mandates and other mitigation strategies. So that's why they kind of made an exception as of the 30th, where if certain criteria are met, that they're allowing for in-person learning only as a part of modified quarantine. Like on this screen here, I'm just going to give you a little bit of the basics, and Dr. Seifert is actually going to go more into detail with exactly what those criteria are in a few minutes on a different screen. But basically, the health department, since the get-go, I had gone back earlier today, from the very first spreadsheet that they sent us for us to fill out, they've been asking about mask usage. So anytime a student has been in quarantine, has been positive, has been exposed, same with staff members, they've asked us on there, what was our mask usage like? And that the intent of that was to see, are these mask mandates and people wearing masks, is it really working? Is it really keeping, the spread from in schools? And honestly, I think that's why they went ahead and kind of made this exception to the rule. So basically, in order to be part of that modified quarantine, you cannot have any symptoms. If you have any symptoms, you still have to go home and you have to be at home for the rest of the quarantine. And it only applies to students and staff and teachers and volunteers in grades kindergarten through 12th. And that is because in preschool, they encourage masks and the staff have to wear masks, but not all of the students can keep them on with fidelity, and they're kind of wandering, you know, running around a room playing. And so there's no way to really ensure that kids are staying in their seats and keeping their masks on. So preschool is not included in this group of modified quarantine. And then also it doesn't apply to being able to do anything before or after school. Like, it basically only applies to, you can come to and from school during school hours during the day. And it only is when the exposure where both of them had correct face coverings on. So, and we've kind of gotten past the point of knowing like the transition, but anything that occurred prior to 11/30/2020 did not count. So they did not switch up anything in the midst of all this.
We're gonna go over some details of this quarantine again in a couple of slides. Julie's got a couple more slides here to show you some of that data of that transmission. But I also will say we will have some numbers here in a little bit for you too, to see we've been now doing almost 2 weeks of the new modified quarantine. We'll show you the numbers of how many kids are actually quarantined both ways. We'll just show you that in just a second.
Yep.
Next slide, Chris.
Okay, so on this slide, I have the picture in my way over here. Okay, so in this slide, this is straight from the St. Charles County Health Department website. And basically on this one, these are just school linked contacts and transmission. This has not been updated since the 7th. And I looked today and there is no further update, but as of December 7th, the top number showing you those that are just contacts of a case from a school. So these are just quarantines. So from this number here, it looks like we had 1,100 students that were just contacts that had to quarantine for 2 weeks. Okay. The second line is showing positive cases possibly resulting from a school case. So I'm sorry, community cases, positive community cases linked to a school case. So for maybe a student who is in school that was positive, there were 201 outside of school cases linked to it. The third and fourth line showed the school positive cases that resulted from another school positive case. And that shows 104, or 94 if you take out the virtual kids. The thing is, Jason and I, or Dr. Seifer and I, were talking about this the other day. This is colleges, universities, private, all these. The next one also. This is a large number of people. We decided there's probably about 60,000 students in just our 5 St. Charles County districts, and then you're talking about like 20 more thousand in the colleges and universities and private schools. So when we get to some of these, we're looking at like, out of like 80,000 students in the county. The other thing that I wanted to know is that this does not count. This chart here does not show students that are getting it from a home or community member. So what I see, because I see all of the cases, I see all of the illnesses, I see where they started with, and I'm telling you the majority of what I see on cases and quarantines come from the home. So we'll have a student come to school and they'll be sick or whatever, and we'll find out that it's because mom was at home with COVID or had symptoms, or they were at a family gathering over the weekend. So that is not included in this. This is only school linked contacts, not community contacts, from kids getting it in the community. Chris, can you show the next slide? So this is the one I was saying, these show transmission, actual positive cases that from either staff to staff or student to student or student to staff or staff to student within the schools. Now this, if you look at the bottom, this is where I was saying, this is like out of probably close to 80,000. I could not find an exact number anywhere, but we, trying to go through our head, we're thinking like, this is probably 80,000 plus people. And out of that, student to student transmission is 909 cases. That's like 1%. So to me, that's just kind of when we keep seeing that only about 1% of students get, or 1% of people get it within the school setting, kind of looking at what we are looking at in our own county, it seems to be true. So, and then the next slide, Chris, was something that was shown. The state had this graphic for us when they did their training for us. And again, they were showing that less than 1% of close contacts actually develop infection. So there's not in school. So there's not really a lot of staff to student, student to staff, and all of that transmission within the schools. I think the next
So this is when we get into the nitty gritty of exactly what does this modified quarantine protocol look like for us right now. We're going to get into another slide in a couple spots here about kind of, again, the steps of how we got here, but here is the specific details. And I'm going to talk about some things, but when you hear, oh, the governor said this, or the state said this, and the state did put something out, kind of started all this emotion with, if it's a mass-to-mass exposure, kids can stay in school. That's where the conversation could start thinking. And you have to remember, in a lot of our outstate areas of the state, you know, and even in our own county, there is not a mask mandate. So there's a lot of schools that weren't wearing masks. And so I think one thing that our state government was saying is, okay, we believe in that the masks are working. And so if you have a mask mandate, then you can go to this modified protocol. But for us, that doesn't do a whole lot for us, because we've been mandated the whole time K through 12 with masks. And so and I'll talk about this in a little bit more detail, but as the health department tried to really get into a fine groove of exactly, and really make this a very specific modification. This is not open this up and everybody comes back, and we're not seeing that, to be honest with you. This pertains only to mass exposure in the classroom and on the bus. So we're talking in very specific areas and with specific mass exposure. If one person has an issue with a mask, this doesn't take place. Only appropriate mask and gaiter usage is acceptable and applicable. That came from the CDC guidelines. And so we've sent that out twice now. And our families have done a fabulous job with this and understanding that if we have any of and I want to make sure it was clear, because this is one of the main issues that our staff's having, and I don't blame it. I'm not blaming them. And when I sent my first email out about changing this, I empathize with the fact that, and Julie even just said, you know, face value, some of this looks like, oh my gosh, we're more unsafe. But if you look at the specifics, now we are, and really we started hearing, oh my gosh, there's some mask issues. We've said all along, if there's mask issues, kids will go home. I know one case where that was brought to the principal's attention. It came to me, and that child could not wear that mask the right way, and they did go home. And there wasn't an IEP process or a special ed process in play with that. So I will say this, any issue with a mask issue at all, we've already told our families this, then the modification of staying in school does not happen. We are already seeing that in the 2 weeks we've done this, from some exposure with not the right mask with some of our staff and subs, as well as our students. And I have not heard one case where a family member has said, oh, I disagree with that. So that is a huge piece of this. If we are concerned about mask to mask, and if there's any issues, this does not count. You do not do the new modification. Again, the new modification is if it's mask to mask within the classroom of the bus, they are still quarantined with the health department, but now they're allowed to come back to school and keep that bubble within school and home.
Jason, we've even had a parent that I think it was at High, that actually said they were okayed for quarantine, modified quarantine, and they said, I'll just go ahead and keep them at home. It'd be safer. So some of them are still wanting to err on the side of caution and do
We'll talk about that in just a second too, because our high schools have all access, and so this quarantine and this modification is not a huge thing for our high schools, but it gets them back face to face, and we think face to face is better. But and we'll talk about that a little bit. I'll have another comment on that in a couple slides down. But so again, when in doubt at all, no exception to attend school will be allowed. This does not include lunchtime, doesn't include before and after school activities, hallways, anywhere, except for the classroom and on the bus. Here's what they're trying to do as well. We can't we can't guarantee 6 feet distance in our classrooms. You just can't do it with, especially when we have 10% more people want to come back. We must have 80% of our families, and we've said all along, our community wants to be in school. We can't guarantee the 6%. And so what this does is for the child that's doing the right thing, wearing their mask, now they're saying you can still come to school and we're not going to exclude you from school just because of where you're sitting for the day. But again, if you're exposed even if you're exposed in the classroom, mask to mask, you still can't go to activities, you still can't go to sports. So this doesn't even do anything for the sports with activities. Any symptoms, staff and students will stay home. We still have, and I have a slide with all of our safety protocols. This does not change anything with a quarantine or isolation. If you have symptoms, if you're positive, if you're exposed at home or outside of school, this only has to do with mass to mass exposure in the classroom or on the bus. This is important. The quarantine is still ordered from the health department. We'll talk about in just a second about what the question you can answer, but the health department orders the quarantine. Now, here's another key, because I've heard this a couple of times too, and I want to make sure we clarify. Staff and students quarantine will only be at home or school. This keeps, in the modification piece, this keeps that quarantine bubble and does not allow for spread in public areas. So you'll hear there's the concern, oh, they're not safe to go, they're not safe enough to go to Target, but they're safe enough to go to school. Well, that's just a little bit different way of looking at it. What they're saying is, not that they're unsafe to go to Target, they don't want them to go to Target. They want them to stay within the bubble of home and school. And then one thing that somebody reached out and said the other day too to me, which I thought was important, is
That was me.
now we know where the supervision, we can supervise these kids a little bit stronger and a little bit clearer, and they're at school and not out. Because the other issue I've heard is, oh, we can't guarantee if they're quarantined and they're staying at home. Well, we haven't been able to do that since day one. So now they're going to be at school if it's mask to mask. And so I want you to make this slide, all I want you to get out of this slide is it's very, very specific and precise to what the modification actually is to attend school if you've been exposed mask to mask within a classroom or on the bus.
Jason, can I interrupt with a question?
Yes.
Okay, so my question is, mask to mask, are we relying on the teacher that the mask was actually being utilized appropriately? Who are we relying on, especially if it's student to student?
It's a good question, Leslie. We have, our principals have done a fantastic job, and our nurses, to specifically contact trace every situation. And so sometimes they spend all day doing it. So it's not just the teacher, it's students that will tell us. It's students, it's teachers, it's principals, it's nurses. It's everybody who's involved in that case. It's very clear when somebody says that mask was, we had a staff member, we had a student, a substitute teacher. That was something that was brought up by a student, a staff member saw it, and we knew that we felt like that was not a mask to mask situation, and we had to send kids home without the modification. And so that's a process within the contact tracing where those decisions are being made. And it's very, very liberal to the fact that I want to make sure this is clear, and I made sure this was in our letter. If the principals and the nurses, and when they're contact tracing, if there is any thought that the masks aren't being worn or weren't done the right way, we will quarantine the original way.
Jason, can I jump in there? You guys were during our board work session in August, the principals came and they gave you their plans. They have created more and more and more protocol that is just amazing to me. So like if it's on the bus, we have multiple cameras on the bus. So if there is question, we can look at the cameras. We had a situation today where we had a student and we weren't sure who the student was eating lunch with. And I didn't know this, but at High, they have a QR code on the table. They're supposed to scan the QR code when they sit at their table for lunch, and then the principals can tell who was sitting at what table. And then they can also go in on video and double check and make sure these people were sitting there. There are so many processes in place to know where each child is during the day, especially during class time and structured time. There's seating charts everywhere. There's assigned seating. It's crazy that they can do this in a matter of, a few hours, know exactly who each kid came in contact with. And it's just amazing.
That's a great point. And that's why things like separated lunches in the classroom, in the hall, or in the classrooms, or in the cafeteria, and we've got where our specialists are going into the classroom so the kids aren't leaving. I mean, a lot of our K through 6, K through 5, K through 4 classes are so specific to their own 20, 18, 17 kids in one pod that you have a really good idea of what's happening in those classrooms. And at the high school level, it's not up to the teacher. The teachers are giving us great feedback, but the contact process has evolved so much. Our principals and our nurses are so efficient at it.
And our secretaries.
It is, and unfortunately, we've become professionals at it. And again, unfortunately, it's almost all that we do all day long some days.
I have a question, please. It's about lunchtime here. Really, this whole modified quarantine protocol kind of falls through the cracks when lunchtime comes, doesn't it?
Yes,
Yeah,
ma'am.
it doesn't count at lunch.
So it, on this slide, specifically says it does not include lunchtime, does not include before and after school activities in the hallway. So anytime, that's why we have QR codes. That's why we know exactly where kids are sitting, because if we have an exposed case that follows that child who has tested positive, we have to follow that child's day for the whole day. So when it comes to lunch and they have that mask off, those children students sitting next to that child at lunch will have to be quarantined the normal way and not allowed back in school for the 14 days. So that's what we're talking about. It's very, very specific just to the classroom and to the bus. That's why we have to know exactly where these kids are at pretty much all time, and have a very specific contact tracing process, which we do.
Yeah. So typically when we have a case, the principals will go through and they will look at where they're sitting in every class. And those kids now, as long as they're wearing a mask appropriately, then they will get the modified quarantine. But anybody they're sitting with at lunch is automatically on regular quarantine and they're out for 2 weeks.
Okay, maybe that answers my question. What about all these sports activities?
So again,
doesn't count.
It doesn't count. None of this counts, Marita.
Okay,
The only time you're, and I just want to make sure this is clear. I'm trying to make this as clear as I can. The only time there's an exception for a child to come back to school during a quarantine is if they're exposed to that positive case in the classroom or on the bus, mask to mask, and there's no issues with the mask. That's the only time. It does not count at activities. It does not count at sports. It does not count during lunchtime.
So those people, such as lunch and such as sports activities, they go back to the original quarantine.
Yes.
It's the same amount of days. They just cannot. The modification is not allowed. They're allowed to come to school. Yeah. And we're doing that now. We've done that in 2 weeks. We were seeing, and actually we're going to show you some numbers that it really doesn't change a whole lot. In some cases it has, because it just it's hit or miss. But for the most part, we're going to still be quarantining a lot of kids. Mm-hmm. But we will be able to get some back. Again, it's only classroom and bus. And if there are any issues at all with the mask wearing at all, there's no questions asked. It is the normal protocol for 14 days without coming to school. That's for students and staff.
And also something we didn't mention is our nurses and our principals know, and our teachers know exactly who's on quarantine, who is on modified quarantine. So they are keeping an extra special close look at those modified kids so that if any symptom comes up, that they can send them home. And, they either become a probable case because they have symptoms, or, if it's a small one symptom thing, then they can't come back for 24-hour symptom free.
And I don't mean to get into the weeds, but how can you follow all the students and knowing whether they have a an acceptable mask or do not have an acceptable mask?
Because because that's a great question too. Because since this protocol has come back, we have heard, and you all have heard, for a better lack of term, there's been a cry for, oh my gosh, we have mask issues, or the kids aren't wearing masks the right way, or that they're not the right masks. And so we have started that, not only with communication to parents in 2 different letters that said, here is from the CDC, and we have some graphics for you here in just a second. Those graphics have gone out to the families to say, this is what's acceptable, this is what's not acceptable, and we need you to start wearing the right mask. So our gaiters need to be doubled up, and our masks need to be worn the right way in 2-ply. And so, yes, are we going to find out oh, it's a 2-ply or a 3-ply mask? That's hard to do. But I will tell you, for the most part, our masks need to be worn. It's pretty obvious that a kid's not wearing a mask correctly, and our staff members know that, and our students know it, and our parents and our principals know it, and we'll take care of that very quickly. So what's happening is, especially at the elementary level, they have gone class to class. They've done some Zoom calls. They've sent their own information out, telling parents, this is what's acceptable. This off of my email or letter. This is what's acceptable. This is what's not acceptable. And not only can wearing the wrong mask affect your child from being able to come to school, but it can affect others. And so that communication and that process of getting the right mask, that's just kind of fortified everything that we're doing. And so we're in that process now and making sure that those, and again, we don't want, with the mask, basically, we don't want to vent or
Single gaiter.
And a single gaiter is basically what we don't want. And we're doing a good job of making sure that is changing over and the proper way is happening. We're going to have a little transition time where we're probably going to have to quarantine the normal way, more so than maybe in a couple weeks or a month, because kids are transitioning into new masks or gaiters, or they're just getting the hang of it. And so we're going to make sure that they're no questions asked. They'll be quarantined without the modification.
And if they see somebody with the wrong masks on, we have plenty of those surgical masks that completely meet criteria. Plenty of them, like 100,000 of them. That we just can say, you know what, here, let me go to the office, or you go to the office, and we'll get you a new mask, because this one isn't appropriate. So,
and a lot of our elementary principals are doing that. They're switching out masks during the day.
How are you factoring in asymptomatic students? 40% estimated cases are asymptomatic.
You can't. I mean, there just isn't any way to know. The way that we are, unless you test every student, which we can't do, we are only allowed to test students that are symptomatic. And at this point, that's the only way we really know how to address the situation, is if they have symptoms.
Isn't there a danger that asymptomatic students are running around school, and could possibly transmit the virus?
But the purpose is they're wearing the double layered mask. And so to be in school and to continue to come to school, they have to continue to wear it.
They have to eat lunch.
Mm-hmm.
But that's always been an issue.
I know. Yeah.
To your point, Alan, the asymptomatic has been an issue since day one of school. As soon as we said we were going to have children and students come back in person, that's a risk. Mm-hmm. You're exactly right.
And our parents want our students in school. And Jason, to your point, from the very beginning, there's always been an issue of students who could be asymptomatic, but we've also known and have seen that wearing a mask is the most effective means of controlling this and having masks. So the quarantine issue, whether we have the modified or not have the modified, we'll always have that issue of students who might be asymptomatic, but for the most part, even the numbers you showed us on previous slides, we aren't having those big outbreaks at school because we're in a very controlled environment where students are required to wear masks. I realize they don't wear them at lunch. And so at lunch, when they have the QR at the table, or whether they're in assigned seats, if if one of those students would be asymptomatic and that would cause an issue, that's probably, but we'll be on it. We'll be able to.
There
And
was a
not all of
slide.
our, not all of our lunch times, and just so you know, not all of our lunch areas are students sitting closer than 6 feet. We do have some areas and some spots, especially at the elementary level, where they are sitting 6 feet apart. They're
Yeah.
away from each other. Not
And
in
it
all
links-
search away. And believe me, back to Ellen's point, Ellen, I agree with you. That is a risk, but that's been a risk since day one. We've said, and now we have not 70-30 wanting to come back. We have 80-20 coming back, 80% coming back in person. And that's a risk we're taking. Julie,
Yeah.
what were you going to say?
I was going to say at Lincoln, they eat in their classroom and they're at their desk. You know, and then I've gone into buildings where it almost looks like they're all in trouble in elementary because they are sitting 6 feet apart at these tables, and it's kind of sad because, you know, lunch is always a social time when you're telling everybody to be quiet, right? And you're, you know, if you know, back in the olden days, I guess now, but you know, it's almost like unsettling when you walk in and like it's like quiet as can be at the lunch table because everybody's sitting 6 feet apart. But the other thing, go ahead. The other thing
I'm glad you brought up that point about, you said it's kind of sad to see that.
It is.
All of us, I think, of course, this is about the health and the safety of our students, but part of that health issue is also emotional. And I look at these kids who want to be in school, and as long our efforts and our teachers who are watching that, yes, kids are wearing the right kind of mask. Yes, we have all of the things that you've already mentioned. I don't have to go through them again. I think our schools are the safest environment for our students. And if they do come in some kind of a contact from an outside, from home issue, we've been dealing with that since the very beginning. I think.
Yeah, we're gonna review our safety protocols here in just a second, so we know how that plays into how it helps our new modification as well. You want to go on the next slide, Julie?
Yeah, Donna, I was also going to say that I had a slide in here and I took it out, but it was a group of pediatricians had done a study, I think out of WashU, where they said that the safest place for students to be is at school during the COVID, because we are so structured. We are so worried about the contact and the masks and everything, where anywhere else they go, they're not, you know how it is. But okay, so on this one, this was kind of the first thing that came out after Governor Parsons and everybody started talking about this whole modified quarantine. And so kind of just to show you and kind of go through this really quick, like if you go like from top to, left to right, like you would read, the first one shows you, well, first of all, and you may or may not know this because people talk about it the same way, but people that have COVID isolate for 10 days. People that are quarantine, like our contacts quarantine. COVID positive people isolate. So there is a difference between isolation and quarantine. But if you look at the first one there, both staff and all the students are wearing their mask properly, and the teacher is a positive case. So that teacher has to go home and isolate, right? Even though she has a mask on, she has to isolate because she's positive. And the students, those are the students that can be on modified quarantine and can go to school because everybody's doing their job there. And the second one, the teacher is a positive case and not masked properly, but the students are. Well, because the teacher is not wearing the mask and it's not mask to mask, the positive case has to isolate and all those students have to go home and quarantine and not attend school. So in the third picture, at the bottom left, the student's positive, but wearing the mask appropriately. 2 of the 3 students are wearing their mask properly, but the other one isn't. So in this case, the positive case has to go home and isolate. The student who is not wearing the mask has to quarantine at home and not come to school. And the 2 that were wearing masks can be on modified quarantine and attend school because they were mask to mask with the positive person. And then in the last one, no one has a mask on when exposed to the positive student. So the positive student has to isolate and all the other kiddos have to quarantine at home and not attend school. So this was just something to kind of put out to kind of give a visual of what we mean by scenarios and when you can modify quarantine. So I thought that was kind of a neat little slide. Okay, Chris. So then on this one, this is kind of where, this is what we sent to all of our families and we sent to everybody, you know, right after this all came back out and we found out that you couldn't have single layer gaiters and all of that jazz. So this just shows guidance for what type of masks are appropriate in the school. We wanted to make sure parents knew what qualified them for the modified quarantine, because, you know, you want to be upfront and say like, hey, if you're wearing a gaiter, you don't, you know, a single layer gaiter, you're not going to get, like Jason said, you're not going to get the modified quarantine. And you're not only putting your kid at risk for not getting modified quarantine, but you're going to put the kids that, if they would be positive, at risk also. So it has to completely be covering the nose and mouth without gaps, or they won't be eligible to come to school and they'll have to quarantine at home. And so at the bottom, I just thought this was really interesting. This was another slide that came from the state when we were talking about COVID recently, and just the distance that that the particles travel based on each of those different masks. And so a lot of those commercial masks, the average distance is just 8 inches, and the stitched ones are about 2.5 inches.
So when we met with our administration, we had a monthly admin meeting, and it was after our first letter that went out. K through, or really EC, but K through 12 principals all came to the agreement that they wanted me to send another specific letter that went out that day on exactly what it looks like with appropriate face mask wearing, so they can use that, and they've been using it with their parents.
Yep. Okay, Chris.
All right, Chris, we're ready.
Chris.
Chris.
Chris. Is he still on?
Yeah.
I don't know. Send him a text.
Okay, so I'll just kind of, the next one is just a couple,
There it is.
yeah, these are just some resources. And so I had already had these up here yesterday, but then the next slide I actually put on here because Marita had asked for some additional information and some extra data. So honestly, you can get up-to-date information on that first one from the St. Charles County Health Department, and that's what the next slide is going to be. So, and then the second one is more, that's the state of Missouri Show Me Strong information, and then that last link is our dashboard that we keep updated on the website.
And let me make a note about our dashboard. We're going to show you some numbers in here in just a second from our dashboard, but we're not actually going to click on this slide. But I can tell you, we live that dashboard. It is continuously updated with our COVID numbers. I mean, minute by minute, from Rodney to Julie, to Danielle, Charles, myself, the principals, the nurses. I mean, it is a constant communication, so people know exactly where we are with our COVID cases. And let's just remember too, probable cases and regular cases all equal positive, you know, that it's a positive case in our numbers, but we want to make sure you knew the difference. And I think it's worthy to note that a probable case means that you have somebody at home you live with has COVID, and you have two or more symptoms. You have not tested positive yet, but then that's called a probable case. And we treat that as a regular case, but we call it probable, just so you know, so we know the difference.
Well, and they don't have to necessarily be somebody that you live with. Like, so in the case of like these contacts at school, for instance, like if you are one of those identified quarantine kids, yeah. And to be like, your symptoms have to start after the person you were exposed to. And there's specifically criteria. You have to have 2 of these certain symptoms, or one of the bigger symptoms, like the trouble breathing and stuff like that. So and honestly, the health department has kind of given us the ability to kind of acknowledge probables and kind of confirm that and send that to them. So, but again, they are still considered positives in their eyes. So, all right, Chris, can you go to the next one?
Yeah. Julie, I'd just like, could you go back just once, please, Chris? Thank you. for those, if you haven't had an opportunity to look at the St. Charles County, Missouri, that hyperlink there, I really encourage people to do it because the numbers for St. Charles are a lot lower than for the rest of the county now, which I thought was very interesting. So, you know, it might be interesting to take a look at that if you want to. And
Yep.
it also said that 30 people are hospitalized in the St. Charles area.
So to that point, Marie, the next slide, actually, we went ahead because you kind of asked for it, so we wanted to make sure we put it in there.
Okay,
So
thank
this
you.
is what it looks like. So you can get this information every day.
Yes. So when you first click on that, you're going to get, and there's actually a little video that kind of shows you how to use it. It's like a 2 or 3 minute video, but you can actually, when you first get on it, it shows you just all of St. Charles County. And then on the left, you can see that I have in blue St. Charles. So that is just our school district boundaries. So, and then Marita, you had asked for like the last 2 weeks.
Yes.
So I went up and up at the very top where it says 11/27 to 12/10. Actually, the information you guys got last night was 11/26 to 12/9. All of the information in the presentation that Chris is showing now was updated, and I think you got a new copy today. So we tried to keep it as up to date as we could. So this is just from the last 2 weeks for St. Charles School District, and this includes everybody living in the district boundaries. This does not just include students. So this includes nursing homes, and we know we have a few nursing homes. So if you look right now, the positive test rate currently is 28.52. And I'll show you later in ours, we're doing some testing in our schools. Our positivity rate right now is about 21%. And there's 30, like she said, there's 30 residents hospitalized. The nice thing is if you look, deaths over the last 14 days went down 100%. So we've had 0 deaths in the last 100% or 14 days. The latest reproductive number is 0.97, which what that means is that the average number of people infected by an infectious individual is like almost 1 person. So if you get COVID, you're likely to infect 1 other person with COVID. And so what they say though is if the number is larger than 1, that the number of infected people will likely increase exponentially. So the lower that is, the better, of course. The prevalence in our district boundaries right now per 100 or 1,000 people right now is about 8. So 8 in 1,000 people have COVID. And then if you look at the line graph on the bottom left, this was under 5 until the end of October, this prevalence. And now, then it was about 10 in late November, and now it's about 8. So the good news is that there was a 20% decrease in the number of confirmed cases in the past 14 days. And like I said, 100% decrease in death, which is always great. So any question about that? Kind of try to just explain it. And you can see the cases by age, that 20 to 40 range is the highest right now. So, okay, Chris, this is the next one is our actual updated school information. This is what I feel like I spend most of my day doing is updating the dashboard. We're checking, contacting the health department, talking to nurses and parents and things like that about regarding cases and quarantine. So some things to note, early childhood has that NA next to their modified quarantine because they're not eligible, because they don't have that mask mandate for students due to the age, but they do try to keep masks on them and staff are still required to wear masks. So when they had a positive case in their classrooms and they only had 2, but they had to quarantine the whole class. So that's where you get 66 quarantine kiddos. CO, if you look on there, they had a lot of cases at one time. And therefore, that's the time when a lot of CO central office was allowed to work from home to avoid spread. And honestly, since we've come back, there's only been 1 case in our building. So I think that probably really helped. And that case was from someone that in the family, so our hotspots currently are Lincoln, Monroe, Jefferson, Hardin, High, and West. You'll see in a future slide the percentages of the total population in the building that we keep track of as a metric for a possible closure of the brick and mortar building. So the one thing that's not completely up to date is the high quarantines, St. Charles High, because we had a case at the end of the day today that they are working on the quarantining right now. So with that, there will probably be several modified quarantines and maybe 5 or 6 at lunch quarantines. So those kids would go, the 5 or 6 would probably make that 51 become like a 56. And then the 22, I don't know what that would become. But so here, I just wanted you to see how many students and staff members we've quarantined since the beginning of the year. Not we, but the health department. And then how many are actually active. And then how many student cases we've had, staff cases, and then active cases. So
Julie, on this, if I'm looking at it correctly, we're sending home from the very beginning, we quarantine on the safe side an awful lot of students, when really from that quarantine group, sometimes there's none. Sometimes am I looking at the chart correctly? Very few people that we sent home because of quarantine, not isolation.
Mm-hmm.
Very few ever come back with a positive or a probable.
True.
That's the premise.
1%.
It's 1%, and that's the premise of the modified, because again, specifically, St. Charles High, 330 have been quarantined. St. Charles West, 377 kids.
And only 5, yeah.
And then the positive cases cumulative are 33 and 27. Look at Hardin, 377 and 22 cases, and you have 26 staff cases. And you have to remember, those cases are also, lots of those cases are outside exposure cases.
Mm-hmm.
They're not even inside exposure cases. You don't even have that number. That's even lower. So, and then the key to this is what we want to show you, not right or wrong, it's just the facts that that's where this is coming from. When I go over here in just a second over kind of the decision-making process, that is what they're talking about. The amount of kids that are being kept from coming to school, comparatively speaking to the lower amounts of the cases. The other thing is keep in mind, look at that orangish column where it says regular versus modified. So since 11:30, since we started this, basically 2 weeks, you're talking
100 kids.
What?
About 100 kids that have gotten to stay in school.
What my point is, this is what's important, because I know we're really concerned, and there's some staff, and I don't blame them. Oh my gosh, we're letting so many kids back in. When you look at it, you're talking right now in 2 weeks, we still have, in 2 weeks, Blackhurst, 6 regular. That means they're not coming to school, 0 on the modified. Coverdale, 6, 0 on the modified. Harris, 5 on the regular, 0, 9, 0. Monroe's flipped just because the last 2 days they've had a big, huge spike in some cases there. Hardin, 29-0. They have nobody, and they got hit really hard lately too. They have nobody on the modified in 2 weeks. So to that point, we're not seeing mass amounts of kids in 2 weeks coming back to us just because of this modified.
Okay, it's Leslie. Let me ask you a question, and I don't know if you know the answer, but in your conversations with the health department and those making the decision around the modified, why isn't the CDC on board with this? Do you any idea? Do they say?
I think that's a good question, a really good question. The health department has not specifically said why the CDC is not on board with the mask to mask. As Julia's mentioned, my thought is they're still collecting data on that, and they're still trying to figure that out. And I don't think honestly, they haven't come out with that statement. So I think they're still working on it. And again, I keep saying we're going to talk about it, but we're going to talk about that they are making modifications, and as they're going with their data, and obviously CDC's talking nationwide, even worldwide a little bit of their data. And I just think they're not there yet, but they are also starting to make modifications with lessening the amount of time that you have to stay at home. And so I think we're getting towards that. I just don't think they're there yet.
And Jason, and if I can interrupt real quick, when I first was on a call with the state learning about that new antigen testing that we're doing, it was at the very beginning of October. And at that point, I think it was the Dr. Williams, the bow tie guy that's always up with the governor. I think it was him that had said something like that the CDC was working on looking at different guidelines for young kids, that they were talking about modifying that quarantine of 14 days to like 7 or 10. And they did come out with those new guidelines of 7 to 10 that they discussed the other day, but it took almost 2 months for them to get to that point. So I think, and they had mentioned then too, that they were looking at the mask to mask, because that is data that they've been taking since the day we came to school. Is, are they wearing masks? Whenever we fill out the sheet and we say, this is a person who's a positive, here are all the contacts on the sheet. Were they wearing a mask? Yes. Were they wearing a mask? No. So they have been taking that data this whole time for thousands and thousands of kids. So
let's be balanced in this conversation too. And we're like Monroe and St. Charles West, they have flipped a little bit. I mean, St. Charles West is 15 regular quarantine to 20. They have 22 in the modified. Monroe is 16 to 37. So it's not skewed the other way either. But the majority of our classes in schools were just, because this modification is so specific and there's so much to it that is not just allowing kids to come back whenever they want. We're just not seeing the data yet in 2 weeks, which I thought we would, but we're not.
Yeah.
Well, Leslie, to your point, I wonder, and maybe they did, but I wonder if the state even told the CDC that they were doing this. They might have just said, this is going to be our recommendation and we're just going to roll with it.
Yeah, I mean, because I just wonder where, I mean, I know Governor Parsons made the announcement, right? But I also know that this wasn't his brainchild. Like, I mean,
Right.
where did this come from? Like, if it's not the CDC, who created this modified? I'm not questioning
the state
it.
health department,
The
Who?
state health department
the
did.
state health department, the Department
State
of
health.
Senior. Yeah.
Okay.
And I will
Okay.
tell you too, that there was a county in the same meeting, beginning of October, there was a county in our state that was already allowing kids to stay in school if they wore a mask, even if they were, I can't remember if it was if they were positive or just contacts, and letting them attend school events. So I don't know, like it was just very interesting to me. So yeah, it was our state. I think the CDC gives guidelines, but I think that from what it sounds like, the state health departments can kind of
So
make their, the CDC gives suggestions.
let's go to the next slide because we can
Yeah.
discuss that a little bit more.
Yep.
Leslie, it's a
Excuse me,
great.
Whoa. So I'm sorry, back up the slide, please. I have a question. So where do our athletes who get COVID fit into this here?
Whatever
They're-
school they're in.
They would be in the regular modified quarantine. Or the regular quarantine, meaning they do not get the modification.
Okay.
And
That would be
honestly,
like-
let's not talk, I don't want to talk too much about specific kiddos, but I can tell you right now, one of our high school boys team just played their first game tonight because of a lot of quarantine. The other high school team, boys team, just played their first game a couple days ago. We did not have our tip-off game with the boys because they're quarantined and and we're keeping that going and nobody is questioning that. So they're all part of the regular quarantine.
Okay. Sorry, I had to ask again.
This has nothing, again, Marita, this has nothing to do with after-school sports or activities. They will be quarantined the regular way.
Okay.
Kind of back to Leslie's point, it's a great question, Leslie, really it is. And I want to I don't want to go through he said, but I want to kind of show you, just so everybody knows exactly what's kind of happened here. So again, back to Leslie's question of kind of where did this come from? This whole year, and I say whole year, it's been 3.5, 4 months. The conversation with superintendents that have kids across the state, not just in our county, that have kids in person, the conversation and the thought has been, holy cow, we're quarantining a lot of kids and they're not being able to come back. And some of our kids have been quarantined 2 or 3 different times and have been out for months. Now, saying that, here in our district, I'm so proud of the work that all of our teachers are doing, but you have to remember, we have the all access plan at the high school level. So when we start having conversations about this, I'm in a little bit different spot than some of our other county friends because we do have all access. And so when our high school kids and our middle school kids in some elective classes, when they go into this quarantine for 14 days, yes, it's a transition. Yes, they're not in person, but they are connected to their class because of what our teachers are doing with the technology. And our kids aren't missing a beat, at least being able to be connected in the classroom. The rhetoric out there from superintendents across the state is, we are not able to, our kids are losing out on 14 days and they're not getting sick. And that's where that data started to get churned up at the state level. We've had those conversations with our health department, even Mr. Elman at times, but it hasn't come up as, oh, we have to do this. It's just, this is what we're seeing. Our facts are showing us that a lot of kids are quarantining and they're not getting sick. Now, to that point, on the day that the state governor came out to say, hey, we're going to make this guideline, just so you all know, the health director met with us. He got a meeting together, and Mr. Elman, I think Mr. Elman was a part of that conversation. It was a good conversation. It was like, hey, in about an hour, the governor is going to say, we think he's going to say this. And we're thinking, wow, this could be a game changer. This is interesting. Let's see what happens. So again, back to the question of who did it or who started it. It came obviously from the state government, the state health department, and our DESE, our Department of Education group came alongside the governor and had that press conference. From that meeting, then we started discussing, so then if you see my slide, the state government gave the exception guidelines. At that point, the county health department and the superintendent sat back down in a meeting and said, okay, what does this mean for us? And again, the rhetoric came up. How does this help us? How does this work where we can get more kids in? But also, what does the safety things look like? And that's where it went from what the governor is saying, and not that it's wrong, but he was talking to the whole state. There's a lot of places that are not having mask mandates or wearing masks in schools. And so I think one thing that they were gaining out of this was saying, if you will put a mask mandate on for your kids, you can go mask to mask with this quarantine. Again, that doesn't do a whole lot for us because we're already in a mandate for K through 12. And so that doesn't make us feel any better because we're already in that mandate. So as we were having conversations with the health department, it was almost kind of, we kind of gave him trouble a little bit. Dimitri does a great job as our health department director. And he said, the order of quarantine is his decision. We can give him thoughts. We can let him know. And yes, the superintendent's like, there is something there that would love to be able to have more kids come back. What I advocated for, I want my kids in school too, but I'm not so like, oh my gosh, my high school kids have to come back because I know they're connected to the classroom. Quite honestly, and we've talked about it in closed session and I think in this conversation, our huge issue is I don't have enough staff. I need staff back in the buildings. And so this changed about 3 or 4 different ways. And the reason why it changed is because the health department was really trying to come up with something that could be a modification that could help us in some ways, but also keep a lot of parameters in place. So we're not just opening the floodgates. And so we try to get in, the health department tried to get in the middle somewhere with it. And then he made that order. So the order is, it's still 14 days at this point with the modification mask to mask that we've been talking about. At that point, all the superintendents agreed to go with that process. You saw the communication through that, and that's what we went with. Again, the county health department has the authority to make that quarantine order. However, as we have clarified with our legal team, and I know in a couple of statements came out of the council meeting that the decision's actually the Board of Education's. I want to clarify all that, and a lot of you already know this. But the Board of Education has the ability to issue more restrictive protocols. We are not going to change the order of the quarantine. But if you all want to elect to do more restrictive protocols regarding children attending school during quarantine, that is certainly something you can do. Now, a couple of questions that have come up is why are the St. Louis County schools, why are they all just said, hey, we're not doing what the governor told us to do and we're going to do something different? It's because they're aligned with their health department. Their health department came out very quickly and said, we're not doing anything modified. Well, if you look at St. Louis County, this is not right or wrong. This is just what's happening. And it's hard when counties, we're all doing different things, but that's just what's happening. When a county is basically said we're not in person, and majority of our St. Louis County schools are not in person, why would they go with that guideline? And so their health department, they went along with their health department and said, we're following what our health department is telling us to do. That's what we're doing. We're saying this is what our health department has said through collaboration. And he said again the other day, this is my order. This is what we have decided. So speaking of that, here is the future question. And I say future because yet again, we just talked about CDC and Leslie, you brought the CDC up. CDC has now come out and said they are, and they put it out there. I wish they would have put this out there before the governor said what he said, but timing is sometimes very crucial. But now they're saying that it is a 14-day quarantine, but you can come back, you can leave your house within 10 days or even 7 days with the testing. Now that gets weedy and there's a lot going on with that. So let's put that aside for just a second. But your future question or your question at some point, I think is, out of safety for our kids, does our Board of Education feel the necessity to keep students who are symptomatic from in-person learning? Or, aren't symptomatic, that are mass-to-mass exposure in the classroom, in exactly the protocols we're talking about. Do you feel out of the necessity of keeping people safe that we need to keep them from coming in-person learning? If that is a yes, that is going to be different from what our health department has given us the guidance. It's going to be different than the other school districts in our county. And I know we worry about City of St. Charles, but you have to remember the quarantine process includes all of us in this county and the health directors working with all of our school districts. And if there's one doing something different, it's going to be very chaotic for everybody. Please keep this in mind as well. We house a program called Lewis and Clark in CAPS, where we have children from all over this county. If we do something different than everybody else, it's going to be chaotic. That's a statement. That's a fact. The reason why you can make that decision is not that you're going against the quarantine. You're just saying within that quarantine, we're saying the kids can't come back to school. And we have to provide that at-home learning. Again, we have all access at the high school level, but our K through 8 is not necessarily online or virtual at that point. They will get assignments and we'll work through them, and we're doing the best we can in different ways for our K through 8. So that's kind of what's happened. That's how it's happened. And this is kind of where we're headed. And I have got another slide to show you in just a second. This modified quarantine came out of the governor and the DESE's decision to allow kids to stay to school if it's a mass-to-mass. That's where the conversations came from. I want to make it clear, though. I've said it all along. Boy, it would be great to get more staff back. The staff are included in this. At first, they weren't. They are included because my feeling is if it's just, no offense, I love my students, but if it's just the students, I feel like we got connections for the students. I need our staff back. The problem is, and this is not an indictment on our staff. Our staff is fantastic, but a lot of our contacts and a lot of our exposures for our staff are without masks. They're at lunch, they're away from the school, they're at on the weekends, those type of things. And just this week, we had one staff member in a building, and I'll keep it confidential from there, where even with all this heightened awareness of masks, we had one COVID case at a school, and out of that case, and we were using the modification, 3 other staff members are now quarantined for 14 days and can't come to school because the mask protocol wasn't there.
Jason or Julie, whoever can, would you explain to me, I have to tell you that I don't have a lot of faith. I shouldn't say it this way, but I say what I think. I don't have a lot of faith in what comes out of the governor's office because he doesn't want anything to do with COVID. I don't have a lot of faith with our county government because he was late to join the issues that we had in our county. And I certainly don't have faith in the mayor who had COVID and does not wear a mask in public meetings and does not want to have a mandate for the city. So knowing all that, and knowing that the county health department basically comes from those different areas, I guess what I really would like to follow something that I have some faith in. And it's not that I don't have faith in this, because certainly Julie has, and you have presented enough information to say that we are safer than we think, maybe, But I don't understand now, does CDC have guidelines that this is my question. Does CDC have guidelines that they have given across the board? And are they making their modifications, and when are they making those modifications?
So that's, again, that's part of our presentation. And I can skip to that if you would like me to, but.
Oh, no, I wouldn't.
This is a very specific, I appreciate your comments, Marita. We're giving you specific information at a specific time because I don't want anything to be left out here. Because Chris, if you go to the next slide, please.
Hey, Jason, can I say something really quick?
Sure.
Jason, okay. Hey, Marita, I agree with you because it shouldn't, we don't want any of this to be political or anything like that. Yeah. But and Jason and I talked about this when we were coming up with this presentation. We are not hell-bent on any one way or the other. We can see both sides of it. But the thing is like, I feel like we just need to look at the data. We haven't really had this modified quarantine for more than a week and a half, 2 weeks now. It will be interesting, and we'll have a little bit of data to see if it makes a difference at all. You know what I mean? Like between.
And that's what we're trying to tell you is this is our data right now. And then also we have to remember the things that we have in place. And you have to remember, believe in people or not, because of some of the decisions that are made, this is what we can do. And this is what again, it's not perfect and nothing will be perfect. But what are we doing to make sure we're the safest we can and also give our children the best opportunity to be at school? And that's what we're doing. If you go to the next slide, Chris, this is the safety protocols that you have to remember that are in place that go along with any kind of quarantining. Our contact tracing, our quarantine still is occurring after every positive case, and it is our system is down pat with nurses, with principals. We keep saying that with Julie and Roddy. It is down pat. We have that down. We've all been trained. Staff and students quarantined, and we've already said this, will only be at home and school. Yes, the bubble gets a little bigger, but it's school and home. Isolations are still happening. Quarantines are still happening. There's a very specific modification that is happening. Mask mandate has been clarified and reinforced. That's probably the best thing that's come out of this is because if we think there's any mask issues at all, we are clarifying that. When in doubt, there will be no admittance to school. You have to remember, we have a 5% threshold. We're going to show you that in just a second. We are watching that, to the minute. We've got a couple of schools pretty close to it. We will go into a full quarantine for a building for 2 weeks if we get to that 5% threshold. We're close in a couple of situations where we might do a classroom. We've done a classroom or two. We don't think we have to do the whole school district at this point, but we will shut down if we need to make sure that we stop the spread. The other piece is.
Jason, let me interrupt. Who came up with the 5% threshold?
That was something that I put in place at the beginning of the year, and it came from CDC at the beginning of the year of some guidance they gave in the summer about a 5% threshold. I knew at that point, and I clearly told you all, to the point of the metrics that were coming out from the St. Charles County in the area, the metrics, we clearly weren't following any of metrics. We weren't. We came to school and we had kids in school. And so to me, we needed to come up with something that said, hey, there is a good threshold of if we really think we get to this point and we think it's a spread, we need to give that 2 weeks, give that building a chance to rest, make sure that we're cleaning it and getting kids out of there. We've done that in classes. We've done that in this building, and we are close to, and I'll show you the slide in just a second. So that's something we established from day one, and we have made sure that is something we look at every day.
Okay, what is that based on? I think the CDC said if the positivity rate in the area is higher than 5%, that you should not open face-to-face.
Again, we're not following anything that has to do with metrics at this point. We didn't, when we decided to come to school, we weren't following metrics.
Okay.
And so what I'm saying is I wanted to take that 5% threshold and use it for our buildings in our district because we needed to have something in place, and it's something that guides us on a daily basis.
But what is that based on?
5% rate of our COVID cases in our building.
CDC guidance.
No, but I'm saying I don't think that it was the CDC guidance. I think the CDC guidance.
That is off of the conversation with CDC. I got the 5% mark from the CDC when they were talking about metrics and guidance. And I used that. I felt like the 5% was a really good threshold mark for us as a school district to move forward with our buildings.
Who did you talk to?
That was something that we shared with at the beginning of the year in our work session in August.
Yeah, I know.
I think that 5% is a good number because we as a board have said since the summer that we knew our parents and our students wanted face-to-face education. And we as a board know, we've even had about a month ago, how we didn't, if we thought we were going to have to start shutting down and maybe sending home the high school kids so we could have enough subs in the elementary. Why? We didn't want to do that because we want our kids in school. We want the high school kids in school. We want all of our kids in school. And I know our academics are important, but our kids need to be in school because emotionally they need to be in a face-to-face environment. That 5%, I've known that number. I didn't know where it came from, but it gives us the number.
You don't know where it came from, it's like.
All I'm saying is, I don't care where it came from, tell you the truth. It just gives me a number. It gives me a 5% so we can watch our district. And I think we've created such a safe district bubble. Yeah, we might have a school or so that's close to 5%, but our students, we're trying everything we can to keep our students in a face-to-face environment. So we have all access. So we have kids who can slide back and forth and get back in face-to-face. I don't know. I don't want to quibble over who decided and what it is.
And if we're looking at the population of the whole area though, too, I mean, right now we're only at 0.8%. So if we were at 5% in the whole St. Charles area, I would think that would be really high and we might consider closing schools. I mean,
yeah, this is just our school.
Yeah, and we're just looking at population within the buildings, and that was something that the CDC and it was in the school district. Jason, what was that document called? Like opening schools or safely opening schools? Something that's something the state had. Huh?
Yeah. Our reentry plan.
No, the one that we got is from like the state or the federal.
Yeah.
Like somebody had it, and it was like this big reopening guide, and that was the metric that was used in there for.
Yeah. To Ellen's point,
I wonder if Ellen, did that answer your question?
Well, that's why I was trying to clarify.
Yeah.
To Ellen's point, I think, Ellen, you're saying that the 5% threshold did not have to do with buildings. It had to do with the actual environment or the
population
or the county, correct?
The test positivity rate I'm talking about.
Yeah.
We're at 28% right now.
Yeah.
So
I know.
And so, to your point, Ellen, I think And I understand that. And so when we were going through this, and it was very clear that we were going to be at school, I felt like as a superintendent that I heard 5%. I saw that in 2 or 3 different publications and different things that I saw, that I thought that was a very good threshold for us to use for our schools and for our buildings. And actually it's turning out, we'll show you a graph. It's been a pretty good thing to use. I don't know if it was intended for that, like you're saying, in terms of the positive test rate in the community, but we weren't following at the day one. When we said we were going to come to school, we weren't following those metrics.
Okay.
And so I was trying to find a metric that worked for us in our school district that could be an internal threshold to make sure we're safe. And it's an extra step that we're using. We're also using antigen testing. Oh, I'm sorry. Somebody.
Yeah, let's keep going. And we as a board, we can debate, that question before, but I want to get through this as well.
Well, it's interesting. Can I say that? I appreciate it, Josh. I will say this, this modification is a slight modification, and all of a sudden our masks are a problem. Our 5% threshold's a problem. Like everything all of a sudden becomes a problem, and it hasn't been for 3 months. So I'm not quite sure why all of a sudden we're questioning, not just you all, but just even some of our teachers, questioning so many of the things that we have in place that are helping keep us safe. And the other thing that we're doing is better than probably anywhere else, and I hate to pat us on the back, but our antigen testing and the way we're doing testing has been a phenomenal thing. Now, are we probably catching more tests? To your point, the asymptomatic people, obviously, we're testing kids, and we're going to show that in just a second. That's a huge piece that we're using to help our cause. We're also self-check assessments every day. We're still using our self-check assessments to make sure we're keeping, hopefully, illness out of the schools. Cleaning and sanitizing has been a big thing that Josh has worked on. Some of our buildings are really struggling with that, to be honest with you, at times, because of just trying to keep staff in the buildings and keeping our custodians healthy and in the buildings. But that's a big piece as well. So I just wanted to make sure, and we can have those conversations when you continue to have it, or have questions or concerns about our protocols, but we have safe protocols in place that are keeping us as safe as we can. And I want to make sure you know that. Okay, we're going to go to the next slide.
Chris fell asleep.
Chris Bennett, thank you. Okay, this is just basically our COVID dashboard, but we wanted you to see, again, where we are with the threshold. We have 3 areas almost in the 3, over the 3%, and we have Lincoln right there at the 4. We're watching that closely. They know to be ready to go to virtual if we need to, full virtual online learning. And we will watch that. We watch these cases, like I said, daily, and it's a great threshold to have. And you can see it's our positive or our probable cases for the whole school district are here, and it's staff and students. Staff and students. There's the numbers. Do you want to add anything to that?
Nope.
Well, and I can tell you this, we're also breaking down, like we're watching, like Monroe, you see they're popped up lately. We've got a section of a class or 2 that for modification reasons, we only got 5 or 6 kids left. If we didn't have the modification, they wouldn't be there at all. So we sent a lot of kids home because of lunch in different areas. So, and we've had conversations with Kathy Costas the last couple of days. Do we want to take that section of the building, the 2 or 3 classes, or the 1 or 2 classes, and do we want to send them all home at this point? Are we at that point? So we're very specific in our conversations about, do we need to shut down, and how do we need to make sure if we think they're spread? Lewis and Clark's a perfect example. They are pretty much in their own little areas. They have a lot of cases. We have a lot of kids coming in and out, but they're all together. So we're looking at specific areas, specific threads, specific programs to see what their percentage looks like. And if their threshold hits it, we will shut down a program for 2 weeks. So we're getting very specific what that threshold looks like. Okay, Julie, you want to talk about testing?
This is my favorite part to talk about, because I think we're the only ones in the county really testing staff and students. And so I do also want to let you know, Jason and I talk about, and actually the whole CO team talks about how wonderful our nurses are. I feel like we have a really, really good group of people working for us. We even had one of our retired nurses come back, and she's been subbing for someone on maternity, and it has just been like a rock star. But when this whole antigen testing came up, they were very leery, and they were a little hesitant to administer tests at school. Because, we in your mind, when something new like this comes up, you see yourself being like a drive-through or like constantly testing all day long. So at first they were very, very leery about it, but we met several times and we talked, because I was like, this is great, let's go. But then you have to really take an issue and look at it from all sides of it before you can, we were excited, nurses weren't. We talked about every bad thing, good thing, pros, cons, regarding the testing. So we met several times to do that. And honestly, a group of nurses from St. Louis County actually, and tried to get our nurses on board with this big petition against this antigen testing because, they had all their reasons why. So they had sent a whole letter and a petition to the superintendent group to fight against it. So, we ended up discussing it, as a nurse group and all of those concerns. And we figured out how to attack each one of those concerns and kind of make this work. And now that we're doing it, I think that I have not heard anything negative from any of our nurses regarding it. So basically, they seem to love having the tests at their disposal instead of like having to wait for test results from outside places, which when we decided to do the antigen testing, you could go and get a test that day somewhere. It was not very hard. You could, now it's like impossible. At 8:00, there's 20 people in line outside of Total Access. It's so when we first said yes, it was easy to get a test. Now it's just very expensive and very hard. So, what else was I going to say about this? So, we also were having issues because our bridge for our staff only has so many appointments during the day. And so even to get into the bridge, it was taken a few days. And so those are days that staff are missing school, that staff are not able to get in, or they don't have a way to take a quick test. So this has helped keep staff in the buildings, because if they have symptoms, they can go to their test in the school clinic. If they're negative, they still have to go home if they have symptoms, but they have to go home until they're symptom free for 24 hours. So none of the protocol has changed with this testing. If you don't get to test out of a quarantine, you don't get to test out of isolation. You still have to go home until you're symptom free. But previously they might go to a clinic and get tested and wait days to find out they're negative and could have come back to school. And please keep in mind too, that doing this, students, we have to have signed permission from the parent for anyone under 18 before this happens. So just to kind of give you a little idea, because I think like what we're doing today too is kind of giving you an idea of how our district is working through all of these scenarios and all of this, how we're contact tracing, how we're keeping kids safe. But currently we've performed 117 rapid tests. And I think we started doing that the week before Thanksgiving. So we've tested 58 staff members, 59 students as of the end of the day today. So they're administered. When we first started, we were only going to administer to staff and students that were currently at school and were symptomatic. We weren't going to allow people to come get a test at school. If they, wake up in the morning and they're sick, we don't want them to come to school to get tested and infect anybody. But like I said, all of a sudden it became impossible to get a test. So basically we had a few nurses that really stepped up to the plate and said, look, our Coverdell nurse, Lauren, she said, I have this entire empty classroom that has an outside door that we don't even have to have somebody come in the building. They can come up, I can swab them. They will never be around anybody. Then we can clean the thing afterwards. So if you have staff that need to get tested and they wake up in the morning and we don't want them to come into school, I can do that for you, which was awesome. And then we saw she was kind of doing that and she was getting a little busy. And then we had nurses that were like, look, if they pull up to the front to the front of the school and stay in their car. I'll come out and swab them. So they went from being leery about doing this to try and helping as much as we can to make sure that we're taking care of all of our staff and students. The test itself can only be, it's a doctor, Dr. Williams, the bow tie doctor, is the guy who made the order. It can only be for symptomatic students and symptomatic staff members. We cannot do staff children who don't go to our schools. We can't do husbands. We can't do board members. Sorry. So anyways, but it's very specific what our doctor's orders are, and they have to have symptoms.
Julie, can I
Yeah.
ask a quick question there? So we know, or according to Mayo Clinic, symptoms show up anywhere from 2 to 14 days if somebody is exposed.
Yes.
So because of this modified quarantine that has come from the state, could we petition this bow tie doctor to say, we would like to test these modified quarantine folks after 4 days?
Well,
Just so that we can get peace of mind, our teachers can have peace of mind that they're not risk. Is that something we could request?
And here's let me kind of give you a couple things here. So those PCR tests, the ones where they go way up your nose, those are the ones that they want you to take between day 4 and day 9. Supposedly, and I think I sent the stats out to you guys a while back, supposedly these antigen tests are very accurate from day 0 to day 7. So like right off the bat. So what they did when Jason talks about the new possible quarantine modifications where it'd be 10 days or 7 days with a negative test, what we're thinking is that if the state and if our local health department goes to that we would ask that doctor to say, okay, can we test them at day 7 in order for them to come back off of quarantine? So that's kind of getting a little ahead of the game, but yeah,
but if we already have 2,500 tests right now,
mm-hmm.
I would still argue why couldn't, because perception right now, perception from our teachers is that they are less safe because of the modified quarantine. And so if we could give peace of mind by testing earlier and saying, no, this person, and you know what? If we catch people, then we've made it even more safe by catching them even earlier.
What they're telling us, though, on these tests is that they're made for symptomatic individuals, though. So I'm not sure that it would really help. And that's why I don't know if he would even change it to the 7 days for this type of test. Because in all the training that we've done with this type of test, that this is for symptomatic individuals. So I don't know it's a good question. Totally, we could look into it. But the problem is right now, the way it's standing, they're telling us that if they don't have symptoms, then the test probably isn't going to be accurate. Or I may have stepped a little too far into assuming there, but what they told us is that the test is made for symptomatic individuals. So I don't know the likelihood of how accurate it is if we don't have symptoms.
And Julie, I don't know if this is accurate. I know it was at one time, but these antigen tests, they're not exactly very accurate, correct? Or isn't there like a 30%?
Well, it's kind of strange, Leslie.
False negative rate?
Well, in our training, they were saying for the false positive was like 1 point something percent, and false negative is like almost 3%, which is very, very low. But when you do the antigen tests here, the health department is not calling them a confirmed positive. They're calling them a probable, which makes me think that, that typically when you have an antigen test, like in our clinic and you test negative, they'll do a PCR test then, and they'll send it on to be doing the PCR, whatever they do with those, where they're a little more accurate. Right.
Mm-hmm. It's kind of like a strep test. They swab your throat, you get a result in the office, but then they still send it off to the lab, and oftentimes you get a different diagnosis.
Yes. Yes. But Josh,
So,
yeah. But Josh, to answer your question, we will do anything we can to get our kids, if that would happen to be something that would work and be reliable, of course we would do it, you know? So.
Yeah, I mean, if you wouldn't mind getting more information on that, I would really appreciate it, because again, it's the fact that, you know, if we genuinely believe that the modified quarantine isn't posing the feared risk that many do fear legitimately, then if we can show that, hey, we're checking on it and we're seeing, good or bad, we're seeing based on our tests, I think that could bring a lot of peace of mind.
Yes. There's a couple things, though, that even if they tested negative, they would not be able to come back under the current guidelines because it doesn't test them out. And then the second piece is,
Right.
like I said, if the accuracy would be one thing. And the third thing is, when we say we're getting 5,772 tests, that's one for each individual that either works or go to school in our district. So when those are out, we are not guaranteed to get any more, or they haven't even shown interest in giving us more at this point. So again, you know, we would want to make sure and prioritize the way we want to use the test. So my next bullet point was that we are trying to test those that have like 2 or more symptoms, because every time a kiddo has a headache or a staff member has a headache, we typically don't want to use a test for that. We usually try to test people with 2 symptoms. So, or with some of the bigger, like if it's loss of taste or smell, I mean, that's a big one.
Right.
So,
right.
yeah, but no, definitely. And we're always looking at how we can, you know, improve the process. And that's what the CDC and our health department are trying to do as well. So, currently, we are making exceptions to those that are not at school, and they're doing them through like a drive-through method or just like coming in. Typically, those are for our staff, but you know, once in a while, if we know that a student is part of the reason that we actually, our nurses first got on board, is because we knew that we have a lot of students in our district that don't have access to good, like to a doctor or insurance and things like that. So we wanted to make sure that those students would have the access to these tests. So basically, if there is somebody who's not currently at school that day, they are contacting Emily Humphreys, my assistant, and she's kind of setting up an appointment for them at our buildings when our nurses are available. So she's calling around and asking if someone's able to test somebody. When they're either doing that, like I said, either through drive-through or before or after the students are gone. So basically, the other concern that they had brought up at the beginning, and especially the ones that were doing the big petition, was that it was going to take so much time. They were saying, oh, it'll take 45 minutes because they have to unpackage it, they have to swab them and wait 15 minutes and all this. We troubleshot that. They are trying to get as many permission slips ahead of time, so that they don't have to wait for a parent to get there in order to swab them, but instead, hopefully they can swab them while they're waiting for the parent to pick them up from the clinic, and they go ahead and they send them home, and then they call them later and they give them the results, so that that student is not there any longer than they normally would have been if they weren't getting tested. So the swab itself takes like 2 minutes. It's very, very, very easy. And so then basically the other concern that nurses had were that they had to answer all these questions about it and fill in all this information. And so I created a little Google form for them where they just kind of click on things and they put in a little bit of information and it sends it straight to Emily, and she uploads it to the state at least 2 or 3 times a day. So that's kind of how the process is going for that. And like I said, we've received about 40% of our tests. And as you can see down at the bottom, we have a lot of negative staff and a lot of negative staff and students, but we have tested 25 of the tests that we've done have shown positive. So, and we've had a few, of course, that tested negative, and then they go and they get a PCR test later, and you know, they've tested positive. So
The
any
good news
questions
is
about that?
But the good news is they're still out of school because they have symptoms and they're not at school. So
Yeah.
Thank you, Julie.
Mhm.
Chris, can you take us to the next slide? We're just about done. So I just want to wrap this up with kind of our continued process and our future steps. And we wanted to go through all this. I know it's lengthy and it's been a long, hopefully your questions have been answered, but we want you to know exactly, again, where we've come from, what we're doing, why we're doing it, and kind of what's the possible thoughts for the future. We started the modified protocol 11:30. You saw those numbers today. Next meeting with the health department and the superintendents is on 12/21. Newly revised CDC guidelines. This is Marita, and a few of you have asked this question already. The newly revised CDC guidelines will be discussed, and I don't know exactly what's going to happen. So I don't want to speak for the health department or other school districts. But what I understand from our last meeting is our discussion is going to be, now that the CDC has come out with guidelines, and they are going to, they have said either a 10 or a 7-day quarantine with a negative test, the 7-day. I'm pretty sure the thought is to go from 14 to 10. I also think that our health department will keep the modified piece on intact with the 10. So there probably will be a time in January where they go from 14 to 10. And semantics is, I think the CDC saying it's still a 14-day quarantine. They just can leave their house at 10. But if I had to put money on it, I would tell you that at this point, I think the health department's going to say, we're going to go from 14 to 10 with the CDC, but they're going to keep that modification piece. Again, I don't want to speak for everybody else, but I think for the most part, from what I understand is, I was the only one I'm bringing it back to you all because we're having a conversation. I think most of the school districts in our county are ready to move forward in that direction. That's not official. That's not happening for sure, but I think that's the conversation that's happening on the 21st. So there could be a possible modification again from 14 to 10 in January. At this point, we think a week left of school. Stay with this quarantine, stay with this modification, and then there could be a possible revision in January if you want to have another conversation. They're also having conversations started with the vaccine. We think that at this point, reports are the educators are going to be the second tier of essential workforce that will get it. We don't have any more specific information at this point, but it gives you an idea. We're going to have those conversations as well. So we wanted to give you an update again, where we came from, how do we get to where we're at, and how we're moving forward at this point. I think it's very important. I want to do what's best for the City of St. Charles School District, but then again, we're working with the health department. We're working with 4 other school districts that we share students with. And it sounds to me like the modification piece that we talked about tonight, that's a very slight change. All districts in the health department are moving forward with that. And now we're going to have a conversation of what 14 to 10 looks like on the 21st. That's all the information I have for you. There's a resource. The last slide is a resource, just some things that you can look up if you would like a little bit more information about kind of some of the things that we talked about tonight. Julie, do you have anything else to add?
I just want to say, like I said, there's good and bad to both of it. Whether we go with the modified or not, but I think for now, we haven't seen numbers just explode because of it, but we haven't been doing it very long. But we would definitely update you if we saw any kind of change in or seeing a lot of cases come out of kids that were coming to school on a modified quarantine. But I don't believe as of yet we've had any kiddos on a modified quarantine come to school and then end up being positive or probable.
All right. So thank you both for that presentation. Appreciate it.
Lori has something.
If we're opening for discussion, I have something.
Yeah. So I'll go to you, Lori, next. Granted that the next agenda item passes, we have 1 week left of school, and I agree that changing something for 1 week, and especially when he's meeting on the 21st, is probably not a good idea, just because it's 1 week left. But Jason posed the question there. I mean, it's the quarantine is the quarantine, and again, we've gotten feedback that people feel that it isn't safe to do this modified. There are feelings, there are statistics, there's a lot going on here. So, you know, I definitely want to hear what happens from that conversation on the 21st. And we may have to have another discussion. Don't worry, I won't call a Christmas Eve special board meeting, so you don't have to worry about that. But Lori, what are your thoughts?
Okay, well, and I thank you, Julie, and I thank you, Jason. You've gone to a whole lot of work. But my one big question is about the timing of this, okay? Like, I mean, you know, maybe it could have been released at the end of January or something, because we are going into we just left Thanksgiving. It's 14 days today. We're going into 2 weeks at Christmas. We don't know where everybody's going to be, and this and this and this, and how many are going to be asymptomatic. And I just think, and all the numbers are skyrocketing and everything. And I just think the timing is really bad, in my opinion.
It wasn't our timing.
Lori, I don't hide behind anybody. I'm not going to point fingers, but this conversation and where we're at came from the fact that the governor and DESE came out on a Friday a couple weeks ago and said, we're going to make a modification to help students stay in school. And as a county that's been in school since August, it was hard for the superintendents and the health department not to react to what that looks like. And that's why the timing of, because now we're going to have the CDC's come out with what they've done. And I've said the timing has been hard and kind of tough. So I agree with you. I want you to know why it's happened, and I'm not blaming it, but that just, when people come out and say different things, and we are a very open county in terms of having kids in school. We don't have a mask mandate. We've said 70-80% of our kids want to be at school. The county had to react to what was presented by the governor, and that's why we did what we did.
So let me understand a little better. So we were required to do it?
No, what I said was when he comes out when the state government comes out to say we are doing this in the name of helping our students in school, and you have a county that has 4 out of the 5 school districts that are in person full time with students, you have the health department, and we felt like we needed to react to what that looked like and try to come up with something that could help us and work with what we're trying to do. And that's exactly what we did.
Well, and honestly, I don't know how this happened, but if you look at the data that was on that community dashboard, in the past 2 weeks, so 2 weeks ago was Thanksgiving, right? And 2 weeks ago was the day we thought was going to start a massive influx. Positive cases have gone down 20% in the last 2 weeks. I don't know how that happened, but that's the latest information. So I didn't think it was good timing, but I'm pretty surprised that our numbers haven't just spiked.
And we in those 2 weeks we've been on the modified quarantine.
Yeah, and actually that's the funny thing. On the dashboard it says our quarantines went up 20% in the last 2 weeks. And that's for the whole county. That's not the whole county. That's for our boundaries. That's not just our school district, but yeah.
Let's be clear again. The numbers are the numbers. We wanted to show you all of this because it is exactly what's happening. I do feel like there's a lot of parameters here that we have to understand, and that we have the decisions we have to make. But we are living this nightmare every day. We know the numbers. We know what's happening, and we're doing everything we can within what we have to keep people safe, and we're doing that. And we'll continue to do that.
What other thoughts do board members have? Mike, you've been quiet. What's on your mind, sir?
Yeah, I'm just same way. I'm trying to think of the teachers. I know, like Jason said, when we make changes, it really scares a lot of people. And I'm same with you, but again, we got 7 days of school left before, if we pass the, to get out. I just know that a lot of teachers are scared. I mean, I got a lot of phone calls and, it bothers me because, again, we're saying they can come to school, but they can't go out in the community. And that's what everybody's been all crazy about. So it's tough. I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, what also bothers me is that we're trying, and I'm just repeating exactly what all of us have been saying. Our intent is to try to keep students in school and our staff safe and our students safe. And our safety is, we have, as Julie showed us, we have some wonderful safeguards beyond just the face masks. And so we're doing a lot to keep our kids coming to school where they want to be and in a face-to-face environment. I think this modification is such affects just a small group of, if you're in a classroom face to face with masks, that's the change. That's the only change. So we're still doing all the safeguards, and in these last 2 weeks, we've been using this modified system, and it seems, I don't know if successful is the word, but it hasn't negatively affected. Our numbers have gone down a little bit, as Julie showed us. If we did something different, and Jason pointed out, we still have students who are coming to us from Francis Howell and Fort Zumwalt and from other districts, and suddenly we do it differently. I think that's going to be kind of chaotic too.
Donna, there have been teachers that have also, I know there's a lot of teachers that, have been worried about it, but there are other teachers who have said, "Oh, this is great because we can keep people in school and I can keep going to school and I can keep teaching." Because it's not just the teachers or the kids that get to stay in school and be there. It's our staff that gets to stay too.
Right.
Julie, can I ask that? It's Leslie. It's interesting. I had a conversation with a teacher today, and that's exactly what I expressed, is that for every call or email I get from a concerned teacher is an email I get from a non-concerned teacher or a parent who is really happy with this, or some other, community stakeholder that is embracing this modified. And I don't say this because I don't feel sorry for myself at all, but I think for board members, that's what makes this so incredibly difficult, is that we are representing all the stakeholders that are made up of the school district. And this school district reflects the community we live in, which is divided, which is all over the place, which is 100 different opinions.
Mm-hmm.
And so I feel it's important, for me anyway, to focus on the data.
Mm-hmm.
Because if we just went on what people are feeling or thinking, we're never going to get any kind of consensus, because it's all over the place.
Exactly. And that's the thing, that's why we were trying to give you guys the full picture and let you make, whatever you decide, because it's kind of like with students, when we walk into an IEP meeting for a student with special needs, we don't give what we think is data. We have to have hard data, we make decisions based on not how we're feeling or how we're, but you're right. It's absolutely true, because, we had staff that were scared to come back to school, and we had staff that were just so excited to come back to school. And it's like, we need to look at the data, and we need to look at all, like, the global picture. And the hard thing is that some people can't, and we're all like this, where we see how it affects us, but it's harder to look at how it affects the whole community, each and every person. And we represent the whole community too. Our staff, our students are just like you all do. And so we're trying to make the best decisions based on the data that we're seeing and the situations we're seeing.
So I think we live in a world of bad choices, period. No matter what we decide, it's going to be a bad choice for somebody. And yeah, so, but I would like to, Dr. Seifert, know what the guidelines are according to CDC when they come out, to see how different they are to to the ones we're following. And because I would just as soon err on the side, if I'm going to make a bad decision, err on the side of safety and health, And so that's why I'm not saying that we should go the CDC way yet, because I thought what you all offered, Julie and Dr. Seifert, were very helpful for me at least. And, but I think that I'd like to know what the CDC guidelines are going to be so we can do a comparison and decide then.
And I think, like Jason has said earlier, that they're still, they made new decisions based on the data they get, because this is something nobody's ever lived through. And so like they are changing along the way. So what they said is 14 days is now all of a sudden 10. So,
And it is hard, it's hard to say, because the CDC is made up of scientists, medical professionals, and again, perception. You guys mentioned the state health department, which has doctors and all that, but again, perception is reality, and perception is this is completely Mike Parsons, this is completely Steve Ailman, and it's gotten political as well. And yes, our health director at the county health department, he has multiple degrees. He has a staff of doctors and things like that. So that's something that we have to keep in mind too. Yes, the CDC is the United States authority on that. And by all means, yes. Mm-hmm. And it's not that, and this has been my kind of official response, as I've been returning emails as well. This isn't a blind allegiance to our governor or our county executive. This is, we pay Jason to have these conversations with the health director and to make these decisions. And that's particularly why, I definitely wouldn't recommend we do anything until we learn from their meeting on the 21st.
I agree.
And hear what it is.
I agree.
Feel like we're running an experiment in real time, but we're doing it with our students. Missouri is running an experiment in real time, and we should look to the experts. The county health department is fine, but he is a nurse with a master's in public health. So he's qualified for his job, but he is not a scientist. The bow tie doctor is a gynecologist with no experience in public health. I would trust the CDC any day before I would trust the local health department or the state.
I hope
sure.
nobody
And
tells
honestly,
him
though, we've been running this experiment since day one of school, since we bucked the system and said we're going to give a choice of in-person. So we have been bucking the system, and there has been an inherent risk to that. Yes, we made that decision, and I did get one snarky email that said, well, because of luck, you guys have made it. And no, it's not because of luck. It's because of the preparation that everybody has done, the vigilance that our teachers and administrators are having. So it's not luck, but we're seeing that, yes, masks do work. We haven't, even with asymptomatic people, we have not seen a huge outbreak, knock on wood, And yes, to Jason's point, any changes in the middle of a stressful time are not welcome, and it's not happy, it's not fun. And so let's continue to see, we have 1 week left. They're tracking the numbers. We can continue to track the numbers, and we can see what Dimitri's recommendations or orders are on the 21st and see how that applies to our district.
And please remember, they have been taking data on the masks since the beginning of the school year. So there is data. It's not just complete experiment.
Jason, when you say let's continue with what we're doing, you mean these last 2 weeks we've been implementing that modified. Can we just finish off the next week so we don't keep changing? Is that what you mean? Okay,
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
I'm trying to be very clear, and again, where we come from, and Josh is right. We decided to buck the system from day one. And so my goal and my job as a superintendent is to navigate all of this and put us in a perfect or the best spot we can be in. And that's what I'm trying to do, and that's what I'll continue to do. And I show you everything we're doing, all the numbers, every process, everything we've got, every communication, good and bad. And so I'm not saying that I'm not trying to set up a showdown for the 21st. In fact, that's winter break. So I'm just saying that's my next conversation. And I've already told you that I believe that the CDC stuff's already out there. They're talking about 14 to 10 or 7 with a modified, but I think, or with a test, but I think most people are going to say go to the 10. And the difference is I'm assuming our district, our community, our county is going to stay with the modified piece and go to 10. That will be the difference, but we don't know that for sure, but that's what I think is going to happen. I would say when we get back January 5th with kids, and then we meet the next week for our next board meeting. To me, that's probably a logical time to have another conversation about where we're at. And then we'll go from there. That's kind of what I'm thinking. I don't really want to set this up for another showdown so everybody can send, emotional, nasty emails to me or to you all again, but we're open, we're having conversations, and I'm not here to point fingers on people. Our health department has staff. I've been in meetings. They have 4 or 5 doctors in our meeting, or at least 2 or 3 doctors in our meetings at every meeting. They're doing their job. We're doing our job, and we're doing the best we can with the information that we have. And I'm trying to make sure you know exactly what we're doing and where we're headed. And again, the specific question will be, do we, out of safety, do we want to keep kids from coming to school if they don't have symptoms, but they've been exposed mass to mass? That's the question.
And if we decide, let's say the expected outcome is that it's reduced to 10 days per CDC, not per CDC, there is this option of the mass to mass modified. Thank you. Then there are still going to be people who think it's unsafe. So we need to understand that, and we need to do our best to not only emphasize, but do what we can to show and demonstrate the safety. And I'm not saying you're not already doing that, but that has to be done for morale and for people to be a little less stressed than they already are.
Well, as Marita said, that the work that you did tonight on that presentation was very, very helpful for me, and Marita said for her too, and I think for all of us, being able to see, Julie, that the data that shows, just the numbers. It's not just feelings. It's just actual. Here's the number of people being quarantined. Here's out of those quarantined. Here's the number that are actually, probable cases or not. Here's, and our dashboard. I think we're getting information out there. Yes, Jason's right that we have staff members who are fearful, justifiably so. But we can listen. We can perhaps, give them more information if they didn't see this and Jason, have you going to share this? You did share it already. This presentation with.
I have not shared with the presentation because I wanted you guys to see
Oh.
it, but it is in board docs. And
It's on board docs. Anybody can see it.
I have mentioned it to them that I've said 2 or 3 times where we are going to have a conversation with you all so they can see all of it. And to Josh's point, we're doing everything we can to boost morale. That's why you have the next that's why you have the next proposal and the things. I mean, we're constantly thinking, how can we help our staff? And to be honest with you, I just don't think anything will ever be enough, to be honest with you. We're in a hard time. We're just an emotional hard time, and we're doing everything we can to keep people safe. I promise you that. And we are every day, and it might not help people's ability to relax, but every day I send out an email every day to let them know exactly the COVID cases, exactly what we're doing, what's happening. We are communicating daily with our staff, with our substitutes, with you all every day, step by step, exactly what's happening, exactly what we're doing, exactly where we're going. And that communication's happening and will continue to happen. And we're doing everything we can.
All right. We justifiably have spent a whole lot of time on this topic. It's it's the most important topic right now. We do have other items on the agenda. Anything from any other board members before we move on? This was discussion, so no motion is necessary. All right. Thank you again for that information, and thank you all for the discussion. All right, 7.02, Family First Coronavirus Response Act Resolution. Rodney, I believe that is you.
Yes, it is. You can consider this pretty much an extension of, a small extension of what Jason and Julie just covered in the COVID update. On March 18th, President Trump signed the FFCRA, or the Family First Coronavirus Response Act. So that was March 18th. And so in that, it gave employees 80 hours of additional leave to use, which was part of the CARES Act. And also extended FMLA to include school closures, where employees could use FMLA to stay home at 2/3 pay with their child. Normally under FMLA, you cannot stay at home with your child if the school's closed, but under a pandemic, it was extended. The FFCRA sunsets on December 31st, which means it's over. And so there's 10 days of leave for quarantining. If we don't do something to support our staff, that means every time they're quarantining, they're going to, if they can't work from home, and not all of our employees can work from home, they would have to use their sick leave. But as you know, with quarantining, as we've known since this started, was that they would be eating through significant amounts of leave at one time. And so what we decided to do was create a buffer here with our own resolution to FFCRA as a district, allowing staff members the same, pretty much the same thing they were under with the FFCRA when school started. We were going to extend it into 2021. Okay, so they would still get 10 days. It will start on January 4th. It will end on June 30th. It only applies if they can't telework, if they have to quarantine. It gives all employees 10 additional days of leave. If there is a school closure of any sort, our employees can use these 10 days at 2/3 pay, the way the law was written, or they can use their sick leave. With all of this, the same documentation would apply in terms of to be able to use it. And we all, if our protocols are not followed by our employees, we do reserve the right to deny them COVID leave and have them use their sick leave. We think it's a great benefit. We believe it's a great extension. We as a district will, eat some of those costs, but we think it's worth it for our staff. And hopefully you find it valuable and you'll approve it.
Thank you, Rodney. Any questions Yeah, it makes sense. I think it's the right thing to do. I agree. You know, while there's still people are still getting sick and extending the sick leave, or not the sick leave, but the COVID leave.
Sure.
It's logical, in my opinion.
Sure.
You know, I don't know if other districts are doing something like that, like this, but I think this is another example of how much our district does care about and value our employees, and try to put something in place before or after the deadline of the end of December. So I think it's a good thing if we can afford it. It sounds like we can afford it. I looked at Charles.
Well, I mean, I think it's one of those things that with the number of staff that are being affected either by quarantine or being positive themselves, we honestly, I guess we do have a choice. I was about to say we don't, but again, I think it makes sense to extend it at this point.
Yeah.
Also know that if Congress does extend it, create something new, we will do exactly as Congress has signed. So if there's a new law, then this goes off the table. So what you're approving is that if nothing happens, then we'll maintain this. If they extend it, then we'll go with what the law says. Okay, we'll go with what Congress signed. It just provides a buffer or a bridge until something new happens, or to provide staff with something if nothing happens at all from a federal level.
All right. Well, if there are no more questions for Rodney, we do need a motion to approve the Family First Coronavirus Response Act resolution as presented, please.
I so move. I can't remember.
That's why I read it. That's all right. That's why
thank
I read
you.
it.
I so move.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. All right. 2020-21 calendar revision proposal.
You want to read it? The motion?
Do we need any discussion? This is to, just to clarify for the public, this is to give relief to our teachers, our students, our staff. The consequences, for lack of a better word, of this are that we would lose 2 of the free days if we get unexpected snow. We had kind of 4 days reserved for that. Sorry, I couldn't think of the word. Reserved for that, and this is taking those. So we knew we could lose the 4 days, and Jason made the recommendation that, you know what, we think it's the right thing to do to give a couple more days of winter break and provide a little bit of relief. So that is what we are voting on. So the motion is, if somebody will move to approve the 2020-21 calendar revision proposal as presented.
So moved.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. All right. Thank you. And hopefully everybody will just be able to have just a couple more days to just relax, be with family, and have a happier holiday. Approval of 2021-2022 calendars. Not sure who to send this one off to.
Dr. Lewis.
That would be me. So when
Rodney.
when we have our calendar committee, we're really creating 2 calendars. And so this is, this is just basic process out of that, is that when we started in October, the following year, so much of last year was about the start date this year, but we didn't know there was a pandemic coming. The following year, but needless to say, you're just approving the 21-22 calendar. There's not much to say about it, actually. It is pretty self-explanatory.
Any questions?
I have a question about how many people are on the calendar committee.
Yeah, so that's a great question. We have I think we had about 14 to 15.
Okay,
It's a representative, very representative of all. Yeah, a few parents. I think we get a rep from each school. We have principals. I think it's pretty well represented.
All right. If no other questions, we do need a motion to approve the 2021-2022 calendar as presented, please.
I so move.
I second.
Yep.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Policy changes first reading. We only had one. We didn't have 20 like we did last time. Title IX clarification. Any questions, thoughts, comments? All right. We don't need a motion because it's first reading, so we will approve it next month. And oh my goodness, is it time? Is it time for our favorite part of the meeting?
I think so.
It is time for your favorite part of the meeting. So,
Wait a minute.
I would give some of you rebuttal time, but gosh, we've been here a while, so I'm not even going to even ask. We'll just assume it is understood. This is the favorite portion. In the healthcare report, let's see if you can bring that up, Chris, do that. Otherwise, you all do have that in your board packets. You can see we're down just a little bit in the healthcare trust balance, but we're still above $3 million. The driver this month was in medical claims. We had our largest single month in a long, long time. We have 1 month back in early 2020 when it looks like we have $761,000 in medical claims, but that was actually where we paid 2 months at once. So this is our largest single month in a while. I'm not concerned at this point. I think it's just an anomaly that we're dealing with. So I don't think that's a big concern. In the next page, Chris, month end November 2020, you'll see everything kind of rolling along, revenues significantly outpaced by expenditures, which is typical this time of year. But if you notice in Fund 4, we only spent $71,000. And so again, that's indicative of the fact that we're completely paid out in our previous bond issue. So there's just not much spending going on there. And then year end, the report that's cumulative, you can see what we're getting in revenues. That's really about normal. We'll see local revenue shoot up next month and the month after as we get the bulk of property tax. But you'll notice we still only have $22,000 from the county. The only other big piece coming from them is state assessed railroads and utilities. That usually comes in January and February. So again, we should be pretty well on target. We are still off a little bit in state revenue. Sales tax has actually been holding fairly steady, but we still have that cut in the foundation formula at the state level. If you remember that about half of that got replaced when the governor released some coronavirus relief money, but that is not a revenue replacement stream, but has to specifically be used for our added expenses related to the pandemic. So it doesn't one for one replace the previously lost revenue, but we have been able to identify enough spending that all of those grant funds will be able to be used. And then if you scroll down to the bottom, of course, this is November. We had an ending balance of $10 million in unrestricted funds. When we see the December balance, it'll start ticking back up because we will have begun to receive that local property tax. So this is our low tide as far as a month end in dollars in every fiscal year. And then finally, on the budget adjustment side of things, we made just a couple of changes this month, moving a little bit of money from Fund 1 to Fund 2. And you can see the projected ending fund balance is just below 23%. If things hold steady, that could be pretty close to where we'll end the year. And again, there's a chance we could go up a little bit, and there's a chance we could go down a little bit from there, depending on what continues to happen. We really don't know what the legislature is going to do to us or for us. So we'll just have to kind of wait and see on that one. Does anybody have any questions?
I'm not going to ask anything because I'll be shot.
Well, then I'll just go off to my modified quarantine, Marita, and we can all talk later.
Any questions for Charles?
Got a motion?
Please.
Yes, we need a motion, please, to approve the financial report as presented.
I so move.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Now, before we adjourn, Danielle, you haven't had a topic. Are you like missing out here?
I just want to go on the record that I tried really hard to limit my words for this meeting because I know that I get a rap for being very, very long-winded on a lot of topics. So tonight was not my deal. Just want to go on record for that.
Quarantined her from talking.
It's now on public record that the length of the meeting had nothing to do with Danielle.
There you go.
All right. Thank you. All right. We do need a motion to adjourn, please.
I so move.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right. Thank you, everybody. Really appreciate everything that you do. Everybody who's watching, no matter what holiday you celebrate, I hope you have a happy holiday season. Just once again, I'll end as I began. Thank you. You all are doing amazing work. No matter what position you are in for the district, you all matter. So thank you all. Have a very good night.
Good night.
Thank you.
Good night.
Merry Christmas.
Merry
Oh,
Christmas.
happy holiday.
Happy holidays.